The last 10 seconds of my previous life were a masterclass in betrayal, set to the symphony of gnashing teeth. The floor was gritty, the air thick with the coppery tang of old blood and new despair. My so-called best friend, Mark, the guy I'd shared my first beer with, the guy who was the best man at my, thankfully now non-existent wedding, stood over me. In his hand was the prize, a single, dented can of Chef Boyardee ravioli. For that, he'd shoved me off the ledge of the second-floor landing and into the loving embrace of a welcome party of wanderers. "Sorry, man," he'd said, his voice completely level, not even a hint of remorse. "It's you or me, and it's sure as hell not gonna be me." The first one bit into my leg. It wasn't a sharp pain, more like a crushing, tearing pressure, like a poorly maintained hydraulic press. My scream was less a human sound, and more a raw, jagged noise that ripped its way out of my throat. My eyes were locked on Mark. He didn't even flinch. He just popped the tab on the can and watched me get disassembled like a human-sized Lego set, his expression one of mild inconvenience. The last thing I felt wasn't the teeth in my neck or the claws shredding my stomach. It was the all-consuming, soul-searing hatred, a vow burned into my very essence with the agonizing finality of death. "Mark, I will find you, and I will make you beg for an end this quick." And then, the scent of lemon-scented polish and expensive leather. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't on a blood-soaked floor. I was in a plush, high-backed chair that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Across from me sat a man in a crisp suit. Mr. Abernathy, my family's lawyer. His face, a roadmap of mild concern and billable hours, was looking at me expectantly. On his mahogany desk, a digital calendar glowed with the date, June 7th, 2024. 21 days until the world ends. I didn't gasp. I didn't question my sanity. The memory of being torn limb from limb was too vivid, too real. This wasn't a dream. This was a do-over. A second chance, gift-wrapped by whatever cosmic entity enjoys a good revenge story. "Alex? Are you with me?" Mr. Abernathy asked, tapping a pen on a stack of documents. "We were just discussing the portfolio your parents left you." I sat up straight, the fog of death replaced by a diamond-hard clarity. The portfolio. A collection of mid-risk stocks, a 401k, and the deed to my suburban condo. In my past life, I guarded it like a dragon, hoping to build a comfortable future. What a joke. In 3 weeks, it would all be worth less than a roll of toilet paper. But right now, it was my launch capital. "Sell it," I said. My voice was raspy, but the command was absolute. Abernathy blinked. "Sell. All of it?" "Alex, some of these are long-term holdings. The early withdrawal penalties on the retirement account alone would be—" "I don't care about the penalties." I cut him off, my tone leaving no room for argument. "I don't care about capital gains tax. I want every single asset liquidated. I want it in cash. Unmarked, non-sequential bills if you can manage it. I need it yesterday." The lawyer looked at me like I just asked him to file a motion in Klingon. "Cash? Alex, that's highly irregular. We're talking about a significant sum. Moving that much physical currency is a logistical nightmare, not to mention the red flags it raises with the IRS, and your job is to solve logistical nightmares. That's why I pay you, isn't it?" I leaned forward, my eyes boring into his. The ghost of a zombie's breath was still on my neck. I had no time for pleasantries. "I'll sign whatever you need. I'll pay whatever fees you charge for for expedited services. I want the first wire transfer to my checking account by the end of the day. Start with the stocks. Then the mutual funds. The condo can be sold at a loss, I don't care, just get it done." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen read, "Aunt Carol." Oh, fantastic. The vultures were already circling, their sixth sense for money-related activity tingling. In my past life, these relatives were paragons of fake sympathy, always checking in to see if I was doing okay, while subtly sizing up my condo's real estate value. After the apocalypse hit, they'd been the first to demand I share my meager supplies, because we're family. I let it ring a few more times before answering, putting it on speaker. "Alex, honey, is that you?" Her voice was a syrupy, sweet concoction of passive aggression. "It is," I said, my voice flat. "Your uncle and I were just talking, and we heard a rumor from a friend in real estate that you're thinking of selling the house." "Without even telling us?" The wine was already creeping in. "We're your family, Alex. Your parents would have wanted you to consult us on big decisions like this." I almost laughed. These were the same people who tried to contest my parents' will, claiming they should be the executors of my inheritance because I was too young and irresponsible. My past self would have stammered, made excuses, tried to placate her. The new me? Not a chance. First, I said, my voice as cold as the grave I just crawled out of. It's a condo, not a house. Second, my parents left it to me, not to you. Third, what I do with my property is my business. There was a sputtering silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Abernathy's eyebrows had climbed so high they were threatening to merge with his hairline. Well, I never, Aunt Carol finally shrieked, her voice hitting that special frequency that could probably shatter wine glasses and annoy dogs in the next state. After all we've done for you, the sheer disrespect. I hung up. Then I opened my contacts, found her number, and pressed block. I did the same for my uncle, a small, clean, and deeply satisfying bit of housekeeping. Face slap number 1. Delivered. It felt good. Really good. It was practice for the main event. I looked back at Abernathy, who now seemed to have a newfound respect for my decisiveness. Or maybe just a healthy dose of fear. As I was saying, I continued, as if I hadn't just verbally guillotined my next of kin. Cash. As much as you can get. As fast as you can get it. While he began frantically typing and making calls, my mind was already racing ahead. The money was just the first step. The tool. The real prize was the location. I closed my eyes and pictured it again. A memory from about a year into the previous timeline. I'd been huddled in a ruined library, scrolling through a salvaged tablet with a sliver of battery left, when I found it. A pre-apocalypse news article on a clickbait site, Tech Billionaire's Insane Doomsday Prepper Mansion in the Rockies. At the time, I'd laughed. What a paranoid weirdo. The article had detailed the property with a mixture of mockery and awe. A custom-built fortress nestled in a remote, easily defensible valley. Reinforced concrete walls. Its own deep-water well. A geothermal heating system, and a massive solar array with battery backup. The eccentric owner, a crypto-millionaire who was certain civilization was about to collapse, had conveniently died in a freak yachting accident a year before the actual end of the world. The property had been tied up in legal battles with his estranged family, sitting empty and forgotten. The paranoid weirdo wasn't paranoid. He was a prophet, and he had built my future home. Abernathy cleared his throat, pulling me from my reverie. Okay, Alex, I've initiated the sale of your most liquid assets. The first transfer, roughly $250,000, should be in your account within the hour. You can withdraw the daily maximum of $10,000 from an ATM, but for the rest, I've arranged a cash pickup for you at the main branch downtown. They're preparing it now. It'll be in a briefcase. A briefcase full of cash. It was so cliché it was beautiful. Good, I said, standing up and smoothing down my shirt. I felt 1,000 years old and yet more alive than ever. Send me the address, and get started on selling the condo. I walked to the vast window of his corner office. Down below, the city of Denver hummed along, completely oblivious. Cars were stuck in traffic. People rushed along the sidewalks, faces buried in their phones, worrying about deadlines, dinner plans, and celebrity gossip. They were the walking dead. They just didn't know it yet. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of something. Not pity, but a profound sense of detachment. I was no longer one of them. I was a player who had been shown the cheat codes. Mr. Abernathy handed me a slip of paper with the bank's address. Alex, if I may be so bold, are you in some kind of trouble? I took the paper and gave him a thin smile, the first genuine one since I'd woken up. No, Mr. Abernathy, I said, turning to leave. I'm getting out of it. With a briefcase full of seed money and a mental shopping list a mile long, I walked out of the air-conditioned law office and into the warm June air. Next stop, Costco. The real work was about to begin. 20 days until the world ends. Costco, on a Tuesday morning, is its own special kind of battlefield. The combatants are mostly suburban moms in yoga pants fighting over organic kale and retired men arguing about the price of hearing aid batteries. They were all blissfully, idiotically unaware that their biggest problem in 3 weeks wouldn't be gluten intolerance, but whether a wanderer could chew through their femur in under 30 seconds. I rolled in, not with a shopping cart, but with a plan that would make a military quartermaster blush. My first stop wasn't inside the store. It was the U-Haul rental place next door. I walked in, flashed a thick wad of cash from the briefcase, and pointed. I need that one, I said, gesturing to the biggest truck they had, a 26-footer. And that one too. The guy behind the counter, a teenager with a face full of acne and zero ambition, looked at the 3 trucks, then at me. Bro, you moving a whole-ass castle? Something like that, I replied, peeling off more than enough for the deposit and a full day's rental. Just get the paperwork ready. I'll be back. Walking into the Costco felt like a god strolling among mortals. The scent of hot dogs and existential dread filled the air. I grabbed a flatbed cart, then another. My shopping list wasn't on my phone. It was seared into my brain by the memory of starvation. First, the essentials. I didn't just grab a few cases of water. I walked over to the manager, a portly man named Stan, whose name tag looked like it was under severe stress. "I want to buy your entire stock of bottled water," I said calmly. "Every pallet you have in the back. Same for canned tuna, canned chicken, Spam, rice, and beans." Stan blinked, his brain doing a hard reboot. "Sir, that's an unusual request. We have purchasing limits on some." I opened the briefcase. The sight of neatly stacked hundreds shut him up faster than a gag. "I don't think you understand," I said, my voice low. "This isn't a request. I'm telling you what's about to happen. You're going to have your employees use forklifts to bring every pallet of non-perishable food and bottled water you have to the loading dock. I'll also take all your first aid kits, all your batteries, AA, AAA, D, all of them, every roll of toilet paper and paper towels, and all the 55-gallon drums of cooking oil. You will ring it up, I will pay in cash, and we will all be happy." A small crowd was starting to form. Whispers rippled through the aisles. "Look at that kid. Must be a trust fund baby. What a pathetic display of wealth. So tacky. Is he filming a prank video for YouTube or something?" A woman with the signature, "I need to speak to the manager," haircut stepped forward. "Young man, some of us also need to shop. You can't just buy everything. That's incredibly selfish." My past self would have apologized. The new me just looked her dead in the eye. "Ma'am, in a few weeks, the only thing you'll be worried about is whether you're fast enough to outrun your neighbors. Buy your gluten-free crackers and enjoy them while you can." Her face went from indignant to beet red. It was a beautiful sight, a masterpiece of petty, pre-apocalyptic rage. Stan, motivated by the holy trinity of cash, fear, and a desire to avoid a scene, finally gave in. His walkie-talkie crackled to life. For the next hour, the Costco became my personal fulfillment center. Forklifts zipped back and forth, creating a mountain of life-sustaining supplies at the loading dock. The total came to a number that would have given my past self a heart attack. I paid it without flinching and had the crews start loading the first U-Haul. While they worked, I made calls. I didn't just want food. I needed the raw materials of creation. I found a scrap metal yard on the outskirts of town. "How much for 10 tons of your cheapest, rustiest steel scrap?" I asked the grizzled owner. He quoted a price that was basically theft. I doubled it, on the condition he deliver it to a storage unit I'd rented online an hour ago. He thought I was a nutjob artist. I didn't correct him. Next, a plastics recycling facility. 20 tons of shredded plastic pellets. Then, an e-waste dump. I bought pallets of dead motherboards, old cell phones, and broken TVs by the pound. The owners of these places looked at me like I was the dumbest whale they'd ever harpooned. Perfect. The dumber they thought I was, the smoother the transactions went. By late afternoon, the 3 U-Hauls were loaded to the gills. The first one was packed with food and supplies. The other 2 were filled with what any normal person would call garbage. I paid a couple of laborers I'd hired a handsome bonus to help with the loading, telling them to meet me at the self-storage facility. It was in the cab of the first truck, waiting for a red light that had happened. I reached into a box of miscellaneous junk I'd thrown onto the passenger seat, my hand closing around an old, corroded D-cell battery. A jolt, not of electricity, but of pure data, shot up my arm and directly into my brain. Corrupted data entity detected. Soul resonance compatibility, 99.8%. Host exhibits traits of extreme pragmatism, high survival instinct, and karmic imbalance. Ideal candidate. Binding process initiated. 10%, 50%, 100%. Welcome, host. The Nexus trading system is now operational. An ethereal blue screen, clean and minimalistic, materialized in my mind's eye. It was sharper than any 8K display, an interface projected directly onto my consciousness. There were 2 main icons: trading and storage. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with exhilaration. This was it. This was the cheat code. This was my fuck you to the universe and to Mark. I focused on the storage icon. Personal subdimension storage active. Current capacity 1,000 cubic meters. Time dilation field stable. Time is frozen within storage space. Input/output mental command. 1,000 cubic meters. My mind reeled. That was the size of a small house. A house where food would never spoil. I looked at the packed to the brim cargo area of the U-Haul behind me, visible in the side mirror. With a sliver of concentration, I focused my intent on a single massive pallet of instant ramen. The pallet, weighing probably half a ton, simply vanished. There was no noise, no flash of light. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Inside my mental storage interface, a tiny icon of a ramen pallet now appeared. floating in a vast, dark void. A laugh escaped my lips. It was a raw, unhinged sound of pure, unadulterated joy. The woman in the Prius next to me locked her doors. Good for her. Practicing. I pulled into the storage facility, where the other 2 trucks and the laborers were waiting. All right, guys, unload everything from those 2 trucks into this unit, I said, pointing to the garage door of the unit I'd rented. They grunted and got to work, hauling out bags of plastic and crates of rusty metal. I stood back, leaning against the first U-Haul. As soon as their backs were turned, I began the real work. In. Pallet after pallet of water disappeared from the truck. The mountain of canned goods. The fortress of toilet paper. The tons of rice and beans. The truck's suspension groaned in relief, rising higher and higher as the weight vanished into my private dimension. Within 5 minutes, the 26-foot truck was completely empty. When the laborers finished their job, they came back, wiping sweat from their brows. One of them glanced at my truck. Damn, boss, you unload that thing yourself already? You work fast. I had a little help, I said, handing them each another $100 bill. Thanks for the work. You can go home now. They left, happy and confused. I stood there for a moment, alone in the quiet hum of the industrial park. I had an empty storage unit filled with junk I'd use for trading later, and 3 empty U-Haul trucks. But in my mind, in my personal, untouchable reality, I possessed a dragon's hoard. More food and supplies than 100 people could eat in a year. I got into my car and turned on the radio. A news anchor's smooth voice filled the cabin. In other news, astronomers are reassuring the public that the upcoming cosmic radiation storm, forecasted to pass through our solar system in about 3 weeks, is a minor event. They expect minimal to no impact on Earth's infrastructure or population. In local news, the Rockies are still in the playoffs. I smiled. The sheep were being led calmly to the slaughter, soothed by the voices of their shepherds. They had no idea the wolf was already at the door. My cash was mostly gone. My old life was liquidated. But I was richer and more powerful than any a-hole billionaire on the planet. I had the system. I had the supplies. Now, all I needed was the kingdom. I pulled out my phone and entered an address into the GPS. A remote, isolated valley deep in the Rocky Mountains. Time to go claim my throne. Less than/action greater than. 14 days until the world ends. The drive into the Rockies was my victory lap. Every mile I put between me and the soon-to-be screaming civilization felt like another level up. The GPS led me up winding roads, past signs warning of rock slides and elk crossings, until the pavement gave way to a heavily fortified private road. A 10-foot steel gate, the kind you see at military installations, blocked the path. A keypad and an intercom were mounted on a concrete pillar. This was it. The nest. The shell. The future throne room. I punched in the code the lawyer gave me. With a heavy groan of hydraulics, the gate swung inward. I drove the last half-mile through a thicket of pine trees, the path deliberately designed to be a nightmare for any large vehicle that wasn't expected. Then, the valley opened up, and I saw it. It wasn't a mansion. It was a concrete and steel insult to architecture. The previous owner, a paranoid tech billionaire named Alistair Finch, hadn't built a home. He'd built a bomb shelter, and then reluctantly added a few windows. It was all brutalist angles, reinforced concrete walls 2 feet thick, and a flat roof designed for a helicopter that he never bought. Surrounded by a secondary wall of solid concrete topped with razor wire, it was the ugliest, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. According to the obituary I'd read, old Alistair had a heart attack a month ago, a stroke of cosmic luck for me. His estranged kids, who just wanted to liquidate his weird assets, couldn't have put it on the market at a better time. My appointment was with a local real estate agent, a slick-looking guy in his late 40s named Gerald. He was already waiting, leaning against his polished BMW, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He gave my modest sedan a look that was 1 part pity, 1 part disgust. "Mr. Ryder?" "Gerald Henderson," he said, offering a limp fish handshake. "Quite the unique property, isn't it?" Alistair was a bit of an eccentric. "It's practical," I said, my eyes scanning the perimeter. The steel shutters over the windows, the dedicated well-water pump house, the massive diesel generator unit. It was perfect. Gerald forced a laugh. "Practical, right? For a zombie apocalypse, maybe?" His joke landed with a thud. He had no idea. "So the estate is asking for a quick sale. They've priced it to move at $2 million. Given your age, I assume you'll need to secure financing? I can recommend a few lenders, though a property this non-traditional can be a tough sell to the banks." The condescension dripped from his every word. He saw a kid in his 20s, probably with some family money, on a fantasy trip. He thought he was going to waste his entire day here. Time to speed things up. I popped the trunk of my car and lifted out the second briefcase. It was heavier than the one I'd used at Costco. I placed it on the hood of his precious BMW with a solid, satisfying thud. I unlatched it, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills. This was the bulk of the cash I had left after my shopping spree and liquidating my entire life savings and investments. $2 million for the property. An extra $200,000 for you, personally, if the keys are in my hand, and the signed deed is on its way to be registered within the hour, I said, my voice flat. I'm not financing anything. This is a cash deal. Now. Gerald's perfectly curated professional smile froze, then melted. His eyes, wide as saucers, flicked from the money to my face and back again. The gears in his head were grinding, trying to process the situation. A kid who looked like he couldn't afford a down payment on a studio apartment was dropping a king's ransom in cash on a concrete bunker in the middle of nowhere. $2.2 million cash, he stammered. The slick salesman was gone, replaced by a greedy, stuttering mess. You have the paperwork in your car, don't you? Let's get this done. My time is valuable. He practically tripped over himself to get the briefcase of documents from his car. We used the hood of my car as a desk. He started sweating as he pointed out where to sign. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped his fancy Mont Blanc pen. Within 20 minutes it was done. I had the keys. He had a briefcase full of money and a dazed look on his face. A pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Henderson. Don't let the gate hit you on the way out. He just nodded dumbly, got in his car and drove away, probably straight to a bar to figure out if he was dreaming. Moron. $200,000 was a steal for him, but for me, a single hour saved was worth 10 times that. The moment his car was out of sight, the real work began. I walked into the main garage, a cavernous space designed for an RV and a fleet of cars. The air smelled of cold concrete and potential. System, I thought, focusing my intent. Storage. The blue interface appeared in my mind. I focused on the icon for the pallets of canned food. With a mental command, out, a 10-foot-tall stack of canned chicken, tuna, and beans appeared on the concrete floor with a soft whump, as if it had only fallen an inch. The temperature of the cans was still cool from the Costco warehouse, preserved perfectly by the time dilation field. My grin was feral. For the next 2 hours, I was a god playing with cosmic building blocks. Mountains of supplies were summoned from my subdimension and teleported directly into the mansion's massive pantry and storage rooms. Rice, flour, sugar, salt. A fortress of toilet paper. A literal wall of bottled water. The shelves, designed by a paranoid billionaire to withstand an earthquake, groaned under the sudden weight. I filled one of the secondary storage rooms with the scrap metal and plastic pellets. They looked like piles of junk, but to me, they were a vault of alien currency. Once the basic supplies were physically stored, I sat down on a crate of Spam, the undisputed king of apocalypse cuisine. Time to go shopping for real. Trading, I commanded. The interface shifted. A new screen appeared, displaying a long list of filter channels. 2chan World, Magitech Federation, Galactic Scavengers Guild, Abyssal Plane, Heavenly Court, offline. It was a multiversal eBay. I scrolled down, looking for something practical. My eyes landed on a channel designated Orion Arm Free Traders. Sounded promising. I initiated a trade request. A second later, a chat window popped up. ZORP-17, Galactic Freight Specialist, request received. State your goods for offer in your desired product category. Time is credits. No haggling. Blunt. I liked it. Alex Ryder, Earth TRN7. Offering 10 tons crude iron feedstock, high rust content, 500 kilograms processed cellulose sheets, pre-industrial newsprint. Seeking personal defense technology, basic energy generation schematics. I mentally tagged the pile of rusty steel in the other room, and a stack of old newspapers I'd thrown in as an afterthought. There was a pause. I could almost hear the alien trader calculating. ZORP-17. Analysis complete. Crude iron is low grade but usable for atmospheric processor ballast. Cellulose is surprisingly pure. Pathetic primitives. Acceptable. Offer stands. K9 handheld directed energy weapon. Used. Cosmetic wear fully functional. And Blueprint miniature cold fusion core model G3. Take it or leave it. My heart hammered. A laser gun and a blueprint for a mini nuke reactor. For scrap metal and old news. It was the most lopsided deal in the history of commerce. Alex Ryder, deal. System. Trade confirmed. Debiting 10 tons crude iron, 500 kilograms cellulose sheets from host's designated storage. Crediting K9 handheld directed energy weapon used, and Blueprint miniature cold fusion core, model G3, to host system inventory. The junk piles in the other room shrank noticeably. In my system's inventory, 2 new icons appeared. I focused on the gun. Out. A sleek black pistol materialized in my hand. It was made of a matte, unidentifiable polymer, surprisingly light but solid. It had some scuffs and scratches, just like the ad said, but it felt deadly. A small power cell was integrated into the grip. I aimed it at a thick steel beam supporting the garage's ceiling and pulled the trigger. There was no sound, no recoil. A pencil-thin beam of pure crimson light shot out, hitting the beam. A perfect, smoking, cherry-red circle the size of a quarter was instantly melted a foot deep into the solid steel. I let out a low whistle. This thing could punch through a tank. And I'd bought it with garbage. ... A few hundred miles away, in a shitty sports bar that smelled of stale beer and desperation, Mark was complaining. "I'm telling you, Dave, my boss is a total tool. He wants the TPS reports by noon tomorrow. It's soul-crushing," he whined, taking a long pull from his beer. "And did you hear about Alex? That nerd. My mom said his parents left him a chunk of money. Lucky bastard. Probably gonna blow it all on some stupid get-rich-quick scheme. Always was a weak-willed idiot." His friends nodded in agreement, none of them noticing the small news ticker at the bottom of the bar's TV. Prominent Caltech astrophysicist dismissed for fear-mongering over solar event. They were too busy being bitter about their mediocre lives, completely unaware that the world they were bitching about was on a countdown to deletion. ... Back at my new fortress, I was busy. The blueprints for the fusion core were uploaded directly into my brain. It was a flood of information, complex physics and engineering diagrams, that would have taken a team at MIT a decade to decipher. But the system acted as a translator. I understood it, I knew how to build it. But first, phase 0 of fortress prep. I'd paid extra for the previous owner's leftover materials. Using a forklift from the garage, I started reinforcing the outer walls with the heavy steel plates. The sound of the impact driver echoed through the valley as I bolted slabs of metal over the already thick concrete. It was overkill on top of overkill. I loved it. Next came the perimeter. I spent hours unspooling a dozen massive rolls of military-grade concertina wire, adding another 2 layers to the top of the concrete wall. I set up a basic, hardwired CCTV system I'd bought online, placing cameras at every conceivable angle. They fed into a bank of monitors in the central command room, a secure chamber in the basement of the house. By nightfall, the place looked even more like a prison. It was glorious. The world was sliding towards oblivion on a wave of ignorance and apathy. Governments were suppressing warnings to prevent panic, which was like trying to stop a tsunami with a beach towel. The sheep were staying calm, just as the wolves wanted. I stood on the flat roof, the cold mountain air crisp on my face. The SK9 laser pistol was heavy and solid in my hand. In the other, I held a glass of expensive wine I'd liberated from Alistair Finch's absurdly well-stocked wine cellar. Below me, my kingdom was taking shape. A fortress packed with enough food for a century, powered by future technology, defended by weapons that shouldn't exist. All bought with pocket change and junk. I looked up at the stars, brighter and clearer out here than anywhere else. Somewhere up there, a wave of cosmic energy that would rewrite the laws of biology on this planet was hurtling towards us. Let it come. I was ready. A small digital clock in the corner of my vision ticked down. 13 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes. The real game was about to begin. Countdown. 0 days, 0 hours, 0 minutes. The end of the world arrived not with a bang, but with a flicker. I was in the command center, a lazyboy recliner my throne, watching a bank of 60-inch monitors. 1 second, I was watching some talking head on CNN drone on about a unique atmospheric phenomenon, and the next, the screen went to static. All of them. The internet connection, routed through a standard commercial satellite dish, winked out of existence. Dead. For a normal person, this would be panic time. For me, it was showtime. The lights in the fortress flickered once, twice, then stabilized as the massive diesel generator in the sub-basement automatically roared to life, with a distant, satisfying rumble. A notification popped up in the corner of my vision. Global power grid offline. Global communications network offline. The Cascade Apocalypse, Phase 1, the outburst. Initiated. Right on schedule, I muttered, taking a sip of my zero-sugar soda. This was it. The great filter. The moment humanity got its report card, and found out it had failed every single subject. I mentally commanded the system. Activate independent satellite feed. Another trade, this one a bit pricey. I traded a pristine, shrink-wrapped collection of every Fast and Furious movie for a black market military comms satellite uplink from a civilization that considered orbital tech-tobe kids stuff. A moment later, a few of the monitors flickered back to life, displaying a grainy, top-down view of major cities. Denver, New York, London, Tokyo. It was beautiful, in a horrifying train wreck kind of way. The sky on the feeds wasn't blue anymore. It was a swirling, angry, blood red. The cosmic radiation wave, invisible to the naked eye, was doing its work. On the streets, cars were swerving and crashing as their drivers seized up. Then the real fun began. People were dropping, twitching, and getting back up. But they weren't people anymore. They were faster, jerkier. Their only instinct was to charge at the nearest, screaming, unturned person. The Wanderers. Classic. Animals weren't spared. A golden retriever in a Denver park suddenly swelled up, its fur falling out in clumps as its bones cracked and reformed. It became a Dithu, a six-legged monstrosity that promptly unhinged its jaw and swallowed a small car. Big yikes for the car owner. This soundtrack to the end of the world was turning out to be a mix of car alarms and people making noises that suggested they were being messily disassembled. It was a chaotic mess. Good thing I was several hundred miles away from the nearest mosh pit. A small part of my brain, the leftover bit from my past life, felt a faint flicker of something. Pity, maybe? I crushed it instantly. Those people out there, they were the ones who would have laughed at a prepper. They were the ones who would have called the cops if they saw me unloading too much food. They were the mob. And Mark, that piece of human garbage, was one of them. He was probably out there right now, screaming for help, wondering why the world was being so unfair to him. The thought made me smile. I watched the feeds for another hour, like it was the world's most expensive pay-per-view event. The initial shock and awe wore off, replaced by a sense of profound satisfaction. I was right. All the planning, the cash, the stress, it all paid off. I was safe. I was comfortable. I was about to be a king. But first, dinner. A king shouldn't eat canned beans on his coronation day. I went up to the kitchen. It was a sterile, stainless steel masterpiece designed by the mansion's previous owner. I opened the door to the walk-in freezer. It was empty, of course. I had stored everything in the system space. I focused my mind. Storage. The icon for prime meats glowed. I selected a 2-inch thick, beautifully marbled Wagyu ribeye steak. It materialized on the butcher's block, still cold and perfect, as if it had just been cut. I grabbed a fistful of garlic, some rosemary from a pot on the windowsill, and a stick of Irish butter. As the cast-iron skillet heated up on the gas stove, I could hear the faint hum of the fortress around me. The air filtration system, the generator, the quiet thrum of power. It was the sound of total, absolute security. The steak hit the hot pan with a glorious sizzle. Outside, civilization was tearing itself apart. Inside, I was searing a perfect crust onto a $200 piece of beef. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen. I basted it with butter, my movements practiced and calm. I plated the steak, letting it rest while I pulled a bottle of 2008 Cabernet Sauvignon from Alistair Finch's wine cellar. He had good taste, the old bastard. I poured a glass and took my meal back down to the command center. The screens were a gallery of nightmares. A military blockade in Los Angeles being overrun. A fire raging through downtown Chicago. A horde of wanderers pouring through the streets of Paris. I took a bite of my steak. It was perfect. Melt in your mouth, tender, rich, and savory. I took a sip of wine. Complex, with notes of dark cherry and oak. I leaned back into my recliner, perfectly comfortable, watching the world burn. It was the best meal I'd ever had. The contrast was so sharp it was almost funny. While millions were experiencing the worst moment of their lives, I was having one of my best. Co-parter world. After dinner, it was time for the first major upgrade. The diesel generator was reliable, but it was loud and it drank fuel. Fuel was a finite resource, even for me. It was time to switch to something more permanent. I went down to the garage, the cavernous space now serving as my primary workshop. System, bring out the G3 core and the blueprint. The blueprint for the miniature cold fusion core flooded my mind again, but this time I let it guide my hands. A crate materialized on the floor. Inside, nestled in high-tech foam, was a collection of esoteric parts, a toroidal vacuum chamber the size of a basketball, bundles of superconducting wire, and a power converter that looked like a piece of alien art. It was Zorb 17's junk, but it was my treasure. The system-infused knowledge was a god-tier cheat code. I didn't need a PhD in plasma physics. I just knew. I knew the exact torque to apply to each bolt. I knew how to weave the wiring without shorting out the entire continent. It was like following the world's most complicated Lego instruction manual, except the manual was beamed directly into my skull. 2 hours later, it was done. The G3 cold fusion core sat in the center of the generator room, humming with a barely audible, clean, blue-white light. I flipped a heavy breaker switch. The distant roar of the diesel generator died. Silence. Then a new sound. A soft, almost silent hum of limitless, clean energy. The lights in the fortress brightened by a noticeable 10%. The main power indicator on my system HUD flipped from diesel to fusion. Miniature cold fusion core model G3 is now online. Estimated operational lifespan at current output, 357 years. I laughed out loud. Electricity was now officially a non-issue. I could run the arc welder, the air conditioning, and 1,000 PlayStations 24/7 for the rest of my life and not even make a dent. This fortress wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was an oasis. The first week of the apocalypse passed in a blur of productive solitude. The world outside fell silent. The screams died down, replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by the wind. My satellite feed showed the cities were now graveyards, monuments to human stupidity, patrolled by packs of wanderers and the occasional hulking Dithu. I spent my time making the fortress my own. I used the leftover steel plates to build interior choke points and murder holes, just in case. I organized the storerooms, my mountains of supplies, a testament to the beauty of paranoia. I spent hours on the Nexus trading system, bartering plastic pellets for self-charging battery packs, and trading a few hundred old car tires for a universal water purification schematic that could turn raw sewage into bottled water quality H2O. I was getting richer and more powerful, while the rest of the world was figuring out which bugs were the least disgusting to eat. Life was good. It was routine. Wake up. Check the perimeter cams, eat a gourmet breakfast, work on a new tech upgrade, browse the interdimensional market, eat a gourmet dinner, watch the zombies shamble around on TV, sleep. It was the retirement I'd always dreamed of, just a few decades early. On the 8th day, the routine was broken. I was sipping my morning coffee, brewed from beans I'd traded for with a four-armed merchant who considered them a potent narcotic while scanning the camera feeds. The valley had been dead silent for a week. No wanderers, no Dithu. The terrain was too rugged. But today, there was movement. Camera 7, overlooking the main access road about a mile out, picked it up. A group of about a dozen people, stumbling through the woods. My camera's optical zoom was phenomenal. Another good trade. I zoomed in. They were a sorry-looking bunch, clad in torn, dirty clothes. One guy had a limp. Another was using a tree branch as a crutch. They were thin, exhausted, and their faces were masks of desperation and fear. They looked like walking corpses who hadn't gotten the memo yet. My system cross-referenced their faces with a public records database I downloaded before the fall. Match found, the Henderson family. Owner ranch 5 miles east. Match found, Dale's Hunting Supplies. Owner and 2 sons. Match found, various local residents. My nearest neighbors. They must have seen the lights. Or maybe they were just wandering aimlessly and got lucky. Or unlucky, depending on your point of view. I watched them on the screen. My face a blank mask. They were heading straight for my gate. Straight for my home. A flicker of annoyance went through me. Pests. I sipped my coffee. The welcoming committee had arrived. Time to see what they wanted. My finger hovered over the command icon for the perimeter defense systems. A thin, cold smile touched my lips. This should be fun. Apocalypse Day 8. The high-def monitor showed a dozen or so specimens of Homo sapiens pre-extinction model. They looked like they'd just crawled out of a dumpster that had lost a fight with a wood chipper. Filthy, gaunt, and radiating an aura of pure desperation. My nearest neighbors. Great. The welcome wagon had arrived, and, of course, they didn't bring a casserole. I took another long, slow sip of my coffee. The beans were from a dimension where caffeine was a Class A hallucinogen, and they gave a kick that could restart a dead man's heart. I watched the straggling group, led by a middle-aged guy with a receding hairline and a look of self-importance that even the apocalypse couldn't sandblast off his face. My system had ID'd him as David Henderson, a local rancher who, in the old world, was known for complaining about property taxes at town meetings. Some things never change. They shuffled up to the 10-foot-high steel gate, their eyes wide as they took in the immaculate fencing, the sturdy walls, and the complete lack of shambling corpses trying to eat the paint job. They looked at my fortress the way a starving man looks at a steakhouse menu. David, the alpha of this sad little pack, stepped forward and tentatively knocked on the solid steel. The sound was a dull, pathetic thump-thump. My finger tapped a button on the console beside my recliner. Voice comms. External gate speaker. Activate. Hello? David's voice came through the speakers, tinny and laced with a pathetic attempt at sounding authoritative. Is anyone in there? We saw your lights. We're survivors from down the valley. We're in bad shape. We need help. I leaned into the microphone, keeping my voice completely flat and devoid of emotion, like a pre-recorded message. State your purpose. A wave of relief washed over his face, visible even on the monitor. He thought he'd found a sucker. Oh, thank God. We just need some food, some water, anything you can spare. We have children with us. We've been through hell. His sob story could win an Oscar. Too bad. I wasn't the Academy. Inside my head, the real Alex was rolling his eyes so hard he nearly sprained a neuron. We have children. The classic emotional blackmail. It might have worked on the old me. The new me just saw them as extra mouths to feed. Liabilities that would eventually turn on you for a half-eaten can of beans. This is not a relief shelter, I said, my voice as cold as the walk-in freezer. Your survival is not my responsibility. The hope on their faces curdled. David's jaw tightened. But you have so much. Look at this place. It's only right that you share with others in a time of crisis. We're a community. Community. What a joke. A community is just a bunch of people who haven't decided who to eat first. Still, a little show of force, a little demonstration of who was in charge, was in order. Plus, I didn't want them dying right on my doorstep. The smell would be a pain to deal with. I am not obligated to give you anything, I stated. However, I will provide a one-time donation, 1 can of food and 1 bottle of water per person. A slot will open at the base of the gate. Take the supplies and be on your way. Do not return. For a moment they looked stunned. Then, a flicker of genuine gratitude appeared. Even David, the cheapskate politician, nodded reluctantly. Beggars can't be choosers after all. I pressed another button. A heavy-duty steel drawer, like one from a bank teller's window, slid out from the base of the gate with a smooth hiss. Inside were exactly 12 cans of generic brand chili and 12 bottles of purified water. The group swarmed it like flies on crap. They snatched up the provisions, their hands trembling. And then, it happened. The wind shifted. See, I wasn't just drinking coffee. About 20 minutes earlier, I'd put a massive rack of pork ribs, slathered in a sweet and smoky barbecue sauce, into the industrial-grade smoker in my outdoor kitchen. The smell, a heavenly concoction of roasted meat, hickory smoke, and caramelized sugar, chose that exact moment to drift over the wall and punch them directly in the face. Their heads snapped up. Their nostrils flared. The expressions on their faces shifted from relief to confusion, then to pure, unadulterated envy. The kind of envy that starts wars. The cold, bland chili in their hands suddenly felt like an insult. David's face turned a blotchy red. He dropped his can, which hit the dirt with a soft thud. He stomped back to the gate speaker. What is that smell? He demanded, his voice no longer pleading but accusing. Are you cooking meat in there? I leaned back in my chair, a small, cruel smile playing on my lips. I am. Ribs, to be specific. Is there a problem? A problem? He sputtered, his voice rising. We're out here starving, and you're in there having a goddamn barbecue. This isn't right. You can't just hoard everything for yourself. You have a moral duty to help your fellow man. My internal monologue was having a field day. Moral duty? My dude, the world ended. Morality checked out with the power grid. Now, supply and demand is the only law. And you, my friend, are demanding things you have zero assets to acquire. I have no such duty, I replied, the boredom evident in my tone. The resources in this facility belong to me. I acquired them through my own foresight and effort. Your lack of preparation is your problem, not mine. The terms of our interaction are concluded. You selfish bastard, a younger man in the group shouted, shaking his fist. People like you are the real monsters. I chuckled softly. Buddy, you haven't even seen the real monsters yet. Now, get off my property. With a final click, I cut the intercom feed, plunging them into silence. The contrast was delicious. On my primary monitor, I watched the group of pathetic survivors. They huddled together, dejectedly opening their cans of cold chili with a pocket knife, scooping it out with their dirty fingers. The sun beat down on them, their faces slick with sweat and grime. Their eyes kept darting towards the impenetrable wall, a mix of raw hatred and desperate longing in their gazes. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my climate-controlled command center, the air a crisp 68 degrees. I toggled to the kitchen cam feed. The ribs were looking perfect, the sauce bubbling into a dark, sticky glaze. I could practically taste them. I took another sip of my hyper-caffeinated space coffee and propped my feet up on the console. It was like watching the world's most satisfying reality TV show. Survivor, you should have listened to the preppers. But their presence highlighted a weakness. A very human weakness. The chain link and barbed wire fence was designed to stop mindless wanderers. It might slow down a determined human, but it wouldn't stop them if they got tools or organized. These people were desperate now, but desperation breeds ingenuity. I couldn't have them trying to climb the fence in the middle of the night. It was time for an upgrade. I thumbed open the Nexus trading system. The familiar interface lit up in my mind's eye. Backquote. Perimeter defense, non-lethal, upgrade backquote. Dozens of options flooded my view. Sonic fences from a race of bat people. Holographic walls that projected images of terrifying monsters. Psychic dampening fields. Most were overkill. I needed something simple, effective, and visually intimidating. Backquote. Filter, technology level, industrial, power source, electric backquote. The list narrowed. And there it was. Backquote. Item, high voltage perimeter deterrence grid, model S12. Backquote. Backquote. Description, a modular electric fence upgrade. Delivers a 10,000 volt, low amperage shock. Guaranteed to make any unwanted guest seriously regret their life choices, without outright cooking them. Easy to install on existing fence posts. Backquote. Backquote. Scrap merchant of Sector 7G. Backquote. Backquote. Asking price. 500 kilograms of refined copper wire. Backquote. Copper wire. I had miles of it stockpiled. It was basically trash to me now that I had a fusion core, but to a scrap merchant from a post-industrial asteroid belt, it was gold. Backquote. Initiate trade. Backquote. A grotesque four-eyed face with chitinous mandibles appeared in the trade window. Backquote. Click chitter copper? Is it shiny? Cathar likes shiny. Backquote. I mentally sent over a sample image of a fresh spool. Backquote. Yes, it's very shiny. Backquote. Backquote. Chitterware deal. Cathar sends grid now. You send copper. Backquote. Backquote. Trade confirmed. Backquote. Moments later, a heavy crate materialized in my workshop with a soft thump. At the same time, a pallet of copper spools vanished from my storage space. The system also downloaded the installation schematic directly into my brain. It was hilariously simple. For the next 2 hours, I worked. The system's knowledge guided my hands, turning a complex electrical job into a simple game of connect the dots. I ran heavy-gauge cable from the fusion core's auxiliary output to a transformer, then meticulously attached the porcelain insulators and the thick, ominous-looking grid wires to the interior side of my existing fence. When I was done, I went back to the command center and flipped a newly installed, cartoonishly large red switch, labeled Perimeter Defense. A low, menacing hum filled the air around the fortress. On the camera feeds, tiny blue sparks occasionally arced between the wires. Signs that I'd had printed by a bored sign maker from a bureaucratic dystopia, in exchange for a collection of rubber ducks materialized along the fence line every 20 feet. They read in bold block letters, "Danger, extreme voltage, survival is your responsibility." Outside, David and his band of merry idiots saw the new additions. They saw the signs. One of the younger men, the one who'd called me a monster, foolishly picked up a long, dry branch and tossed it at the fence. The moment it made contact, there was a loud crack, and the branch instantly burst into flames. They scrambled back, their faces pale with terror. The last vestiges of their entitlement had been shocked right out of them, replaced by a healthy dose of fear. Perfect. But they didn't leave. As dusk fell, turning the sky a bruised purple, they retreated about 200 yards and made a small, pathetic campfire. They were outside the effective range of any small arms I had. Not that I used such primitive things, but they were still well within view of my cameras. I zoomed in with the high-powered optics. They weren't just resting, they were planning. David was at the center, his hands waving, his face a mask of fury as he pointed back at my fortress. They weren't giving up. They were regrouping. Their pathetic gratitude had fully metastasized into a burning, violent jealousy. The human element of the apocalypse was proving to be just as predictable and far more annoying than the zombies. I leaned back, a genuine predatory grin spreading across my face as I took my first bite of the perfectly cooked, smoky sweet rib. It was divine. Let them plot. Let them scheme. They thought the game was about sharing resources. They were about to learn that in my world the only thing I was willing to share was a lesson in abject despair. This was going to be so much fun. Apocalypse Day 9. The sun rose on David Henderson's pathetic little Hooverville, and my high-res cameras captured every miserable detail. They'd attracted more stragglers overnight. It was a magnet for the desperate and the dumb. The original dozen had now swelled to nearly 25, a veritable clown show of the unprepared. I watched them from the comfort of my leather recliner, enjoying a bowl of cereal that, thanks to the Nexus system, was sourced from a dimension where the milk stayed perpetually at that perfect, almost frozen temperature. It was glorious. On the main screen, David was in his element. He'd found an overturned pickup truck to use as a stage, and he was working the crowd like a low-rent televangelist selling salvation in a spray can. The man was a natural-born grifter. The apocalypse hadn't changed him. It had just given him a new, more gullible audience. "Look at that fortress," he bellowed, pointing a grimy finger in my general direction. His voice, tinny and distorted through the long-range microphone I had aimed at them, was filled with manufactured outrage. "Lights, walls, the smell of cooked food. While we're out here eating weeds and drinking puddle water, the man inside, one man, is living like a king." A ripple of angry murmurs went through the crowd of losers. He was good, I'll give him that. He was playing all the greatest hits: envy, injustice, righteous indignation. He was weaponizing their misery and aiming it squarely at my front gate. "Those resources don't belong to him," he roared, getting into the rhythm. "In a crisis like this, food, water, medicine, that belongs to the community. It belongs to us. He is hoarding what we need to survive. That's not just selfish. It's a crime against humanity." My internal monologue was practically cackling. Crime against humanity? Bro, humanity just got canceled. The only laws left are physics and property rights, and I own this property. This was beyond pathetic. It was peak main character syndrome, except he was the villain in my story, not the hero of his. But then, a little bit of drama unfolded. An older woman, clearly exhausted and with more sense than the rest of them combined, raised a shaky hand. "But he gave us food yesterday," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And that fence? It electrocuted a tree branch. What can we even do? Maybe we should just move on." David's face, a mask of righteous fury a second ago, went cold. He turned his gaze on the old woman, and the friendly, charismatic leader vanished, replaced by a bully. "Move on," he scoffed, his voice dripping with venom. "Move on to what? More starving? More running from those things? Everything we need is right there." He jabbed his finger at my fortress again. "Are you with us, or are you with him? There's no room for cowards here." A younger, thuggish-looking guy, standing next to David, stepped forward. "Yeah, old lady, shut your hole. If you're too scared, you can get out. We don't need dead weight." The woman flinched and fell silent, shrinking back into the crowd. The few others who had looked hesitant immediately straightened up, their faces hardening. Peer pressure. The oldest, most effective tool in the human manipulation handbook. Nobody wants to be the outcast, especially when being cast out means becoming zombie chow. I took another spoonful of my cosmic cereal. Delicious. David had just consolidated his power, weeding out the slightest hint of dissent. He wasn't building a community. He was forging a mob. A blunt instrument of pure, unadulterated jealousy. I had to admit, it was fascinating to watch. Like a car crash in slow motion. An entirely preventable, hilariously predictable car crash. Their little planning session was getting boring, though. Time for some productivity. Their presence highlighted the need for another layer of security. The electric fence was a great physical deterrent, but I was a man of refined tastes. I wanted something more elegant, something that said, "You are so far beneath me, you can't even touch the walls of my house." I pulled up the Nexus trading system. Backquote. Nexus system online. Welcome, Overlord of Earth, self-proclaimed. Backquote. The system's AI had developed a sense of humor. Cute. Backquote. Defense, base-wide, energy, passive. Backquote. The list that populated was insane. Planetary shield generators from Star Empire Xylos. Chromatin distortion fields that aged intruders to dust. Reality warping bubbles from Lovecraftian dimensions. All a bit much for dealing with some angry rednecks. And the cost was astronomical, asking for things like a captured star or the collective sorrow of a forgotten god. Yeah, hard pass. Backquote. Filter power source, ambient/low draw, type, magical/cultivation. Backquote. The list got much more reasonable. That's when I saw it. An item so perfect, so beautifully tailored to my needs, it was like the system had read my mind. Backquote. Foundation Grade Barrier Stone. Sect Starter Pack Edition. Backquote. Backquote. Description. A simple, one-use artifact from the Azure Cloud cultivation world. When planted in the earth and activated, it draws ambient energy to project a durable, invisible barrier around a radius of 500 meters. Stops physical objects and low-level energy attacks. Basically a keep-out sign for anyone below the Foundation establishment realm. It's what you give a new disciple when they go build their first meditation cave. Backquote. Backquote. Quartermaster of the Serene Stream Sect. Backquote. Backquote. Asking price. 50 cubic meters of miscellaneous plastic waste. Any type. Backquote. I had to read that twice. Plastic. Effing plastic. Water bottles. Grocery bags, old lawn chairs. You name it. To me, it was literal garbage, a mountain of which I had collected from a nearby landfill just in case. But to this guy. Backquote. Opening trade channel with Elder Jingfei. Backquote. An image of an old man with a long, wispy white beard and a look of profound exhaustion appeared in the trade window. He looked like he hadn't slept in a century. Backquote. Alex, you want plastic? For a magic barrier stone? Backquote. The elder sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 annoying apprentices. Backquote. Elder Jingfei, the young master of the sect, has a new fixation. He calls it the art of mundane transmutation, and he wants to practice turning polluting mortal refuse into spiritually attuned ducks for the pond. He has failed 87 times. Our mountain is now covered in half-transmuted, vaguely duck-shaped plastic horrors. But he says he is on the verge of a breakthrough and demands more materials. Please, take this stone, just take it. And give me the plastic. I need to clear my ledger of duck requisition forms before the sect master's inspection. Backquote. I almost laughed out loud. It was the most beautiful, symbiotic relationship I could imagine. I was offloading my garbage onto a magical dimension to fuel some rich kid's hobby, and in return, I was getting a military-grade magic shield. This system was the best thing ever. Backquote. Initiate trade. Backquote. Backquote. Trade confirmed. Your trash is now our problem. Good luck. Backquote. The message from Elder Jingfei had a distinct note of relief. In my main storage warehouse, a massive pile of compressed plastic bales vanished. In their place, sitting on the concrete floor, was a single, smooth gray stone, about the size of a bowling ball. It felt slightly warm to the touch and hummed with a barely perceptible energy. The installation instructions were, as always, downloaded directly into my brain. Step 1, dig a hole. Step 2, put the stone in the hole. Step 3, push a little bit of my own will into it. Seriously, that was it. I took the stone to the exact center of my property, the middle of the manicured lawn I hadn't had to touch once, thanks to a self-maintaining turf I'd bought for a few dozen pairs of old sneakers. I dug a small hole, placed the stone inside, and covered it back up. Then I placed my hand on the grass above it and focused. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a wave of energy, completely invisible, silent and undetectable, pulsed outwards from the stone. It expanded in a perfect dome, passing through me, through the walls of my house, all the way to the outer perimeter, neatly encompassing my entire property, just inside the electric fence. I felt a subtle change in the air pressure, a strange, static-filled stillness. The barrier was up. Double-layered defense. High-tech electricity on the outside for the shock-and-awe factor, and high-fantasy magic on the inside as the absolute non-negotiable stopgap. Let them come. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I switched my monitors to scan the wider valley. The zombie situation was getting spicy. The standard wanderers were still the majority, but my long-range thermal scanners were picking up new signatures. Sprinters, as the system unofficially tagged them. Faster, more agile, and seemingly more intelligent, moving in small packs instead of a shambling horde. A few survivor camps dotted the landscape, visible by their campfires. I watched on one screen as two of these groups, little more than thermal blobs, violently collided over the ruins of a gas station. The fight was brutal, short, and ended with both sides losing. The new world was eating itself alive. It just made my steak taste better. Yes, I was having steak tonight. A perfect, medium-rare ribeye, traded from a butcher in a fantasy world who wanted a 6-pack of cheap beer. My attention snapped back to David's camp. His recruitment drive had been a massive success. The crowd had swelled to over 30 people now, men, women, and a few teenagers, all looking hungry and pissed off. They'd scavenged some weapons, a couple of old hunting rifles, a few handguns, and a lot of pipes, baseball bats, and sharpened sticks. They looked like the cast of a low-budget Mad Max knockoff. David stood on his pickup truck stage, illuminated by the flickering firelight. His voice was low and conspiratorial now, but the intensity was a fever pitch. "Tonight," he said, and the crowd leaned in. "Tonight, we take back what is ours. We have numbers. He is just one man. That fence is just a trick. Once we're over, he can't stop all of us. We will flood that place and enjoy the feast he's been keeping from us. There is no law. There is no police. There is only us. They can't punish a crowd." A feral cheer went up from the mob. They were high on their own desperation and his empty promises. They truly believed their own hype. They thought numbers and rage were a substitute for actual power. I took a slow sip of a 200-year-old dwarven ale that tasted of honey and battle. On the screen, the mob of morons began to form up, grabbing their pathetic weapons, their faces set in grim, determined lines. They were actually going to do it. A wide, predatory grin spread across my face. This was going to be better than any movie. "Showtime," I murmured to the empty room, and turned up the volume on the external speakers. I wanted to hear everything. Apocalypse, Day 9. Night. The first act of David Henderson's community theater production, Let's Rob the Guy Who's Obviously a Doomsday Prepper, began shortly after 10 p.m. I watched it all unfold on my 8K monitors, a crystal clear feed from a dozen different angles. It was better than Netflix mostly because the extras in this show were about to experience some very real, very permanent method acting. They moved under the cover of darkness, a concept that was completely useless against my thermal cameras. 32 warm bodies, glowing like pathetic little birthday candles on the screen, shuffled through the woods. They were trying to be stealthy, which was hilarious. They crunched leaves and snapped twigs with all the subtlety of a herd of elephants in a china shop. I could probably hear them from my living room even without the high-gain microphones. David, the aspiring tin pot dictator, wasn't leading from the front, of course. Figures. He was barking orders from the rear, pushing a couple of younger, dumber guys forward with wire cutters. Their target was the outermost layer, a simple 10-foot-high chain-link fence topped with concertina wire. It was basically a welcome mat. A "you must be this stupid to enter" sign. The wire cutters snipped through the chain link with a satisfying ping that my audio sensors picked up perfectly. A small cheer went through the group of morons. Success. They'd breached the first line of defense. The confidence in the mob swelled. They were doing it. They were taking back what was theirs. I watched them pour through the gap they'd created. Their faces a mix of fear and greedy exhilaration. They were now in the 50-foot kill zone between the outer fence and the main wall. This was my lawn. And they were about to find out I take trespassing very, very seriously. "Okay, spread out. The Molotovs now." David's voice was a sharp, excited bark. A half-dozen of them lit up rags stuffed into glass bottles, an act that made them perfectly visible even on the standard light spectrum cameras. They lobbed their pathetic little firebombs. One fell short, igniting a bush. Another hit the 20-foot-high reinforced concrete wall, with a soft thump and a splash of fire that slid down the surface and died out in seconds. The wall, a special composite I'd traded a crate of Twinkies for, didn't even get stained. But it looked dramatic. Fire and shouting. The mob was feeling it. They were warriors. Liberators. David scrambled on top of a large boulder to give another one of his god-awful speeches. The firelight danced on his face, making him look like some kind of deranged prophet. "See? He's just hiding. He's scared. All that fancy-looking stuff is just a show. He's one man. We are 30. Push forward. The fence. Get through the fence and we're in." He pointed at the second fence. The real one. The one that was currently humming with enough juice to flash fry a T-Rex. My internal monologue was laughing its ass off. "Yes, please. Listen to the idiot. Go on. Touch the shiny fence. It's for the, quote, community." Three of the most eager idiots, the ones who had been nodding the hardest at David's speech, charged forward. One was the thuggish-looking guy who'd told the old woman to shut up earlier. They were the vanguard of this new, equitable society. They hit the fence at a full run. There was no loud bang, just a wet, sizzling crackle that cut through the night air, followed by the immediate, overpowering smell of ozone and cooked pork. The three men didn't even have time to scream. Their bodies convulsed violently for a single, shocking second, lit up from the inside like macabre Christmas lights. Then they just dropped, smoldering lumps of meat twitching on the grass. The cheering stopped. The mob froze. The 30-foot gap between them and the smoking remains of their vanguard suddenly felt like a million miles. The bravado evaporated from their faces, replaced by a primal, slack-jawed horror. That was my cue. With a flick of a switch on my control panel, a military-grade spotlight mounted on the wall blazed to life, pinning David Henderson on his rock like a bug under a microscope. He threw up a hand to shield his eyes, his mouth hanging open. I stepped into the light's corona, standing atop my fortress wall. I wasn't wearing any tactical gear, just jeans and a t-shirt. In my hands, I held the SK9 laser rifle, a sleek black metal weapon I traded from a Tinte merchant for a first-edition set of Star Wars Blu-rays. It didn't look like a gun. It looked like a prop from a movie far more expensive than this one. I gave you a chance, I said. My voice, amplified by the external speaker system, boomed across the clearing. It was calm, conversational, and utterly devoid of emotion. You chose this. David's face, bleached white by the spotlight, contorted. The charismatic leader was gone, replaced by a terrified little rat. F fire! Shoot him! He's just one guy, he stammered, pointing a shaky finger at me. A few of the braver, or stupider members of the mob raised their hunting rifles. They were too slow. I didn't even bother aiming down the sights. The rifle's internal targeting system had already locked onto David's knee. I squeezed the trigger. There was no sound, no recoil, just a pencil-thin beam of brilliant red light that crossed the distance in an instant. It struck David's right kneecap. A small puff of vaporized flesh and fabric erupted from the point of impact. The scream that followed was art. It ripped through the night, a high-pitched, pig-like squeal of pure agony and disbelief. He collapsed off his rock, clutching a leg that now had a perfectly cauterized, smoking hole where his knee used to be. I adjusted my aim slightly. The thuggish guy's best friend, who was now raising his own handgun with murderous intent, became my next target. Another silent red beam. Another perfect hole through his shooting shoulder. He dropped his weapon, his screech of pain joining David's in a lovely duet of stupidity's consequences. A chilling, absolute silence fell over the rest of the mob. The two men writhing and screaming on the ground were a far more effective deterrent than the electrified fence. This wasn't a game, this wasn't a righteous uprising, this was an execution. They got the message. It started with one person dropping a pipe. Then another threw down a baseball bat. Within seconds, a clatter of metal and wood echoed in the clearing as every single one of them abandoned their pathetic weapons. They turned and ran. They didn't even look back. They scrambled over each other to get back through the hole in the first fence, their pathetic revolution ending in a stampede of terror. I watched them go, my fingers still resting lightly on the trigger. I could have vaporized every single one of them. But that would be a waste of energy. This was better. This was more efficient. Let them run. Let them be a walking, talking billboard for what happens when you fuck with my property. Fear is the most contagious disease in the apocalypse, and I had just released a potent new strain into the wild. I stayed on the wall until the last of the thermal signatures vanished into the trees. David and his wounded crony were left behind, whimpering on the ground. I considered leaving them for the wanderers, but that felt messy. Instead, I aimed the SK9 again. 2 more silent flashes of light. One for David's other knee. One for his remaining good shoulder. I wanted him alive. I wanted him to crawl his way back to whatever hovel he came from, and spend the rest of his short, miserable life as a crippled, powerless monument to his own arrogance. Finally, I turned off the spotlight and walked back inside. The adrenaline, what little there was, faded. The attack hadn't been a threat. It had been an annoyance. A chore. Watching them writhe on the ground was satisfying for about 5 minutes. But now I was just thinking about the logistics. My internal monologue kicked into overdrive. Okay, so that worked. A+. But I'm not playing guard duty every night. I've got better things to do, like rewatching The Office for the 10th time. Relying on me to be awake and armed is a single point of failure. Nope. Not sustainable. The attack had clearly highlighted a weakness in my setup. It was too manual. I needed automation. I needed a defense system that would deal with these idiots without me having to put down my beer. I sat back down in my leather recliner, pulled up the Nexus system interface, and typed in a new query. Backquote. Search, defense, automated, lethal, perimeter. The list populated instantly. Sentry guns from corporate wars on Kepler, minus 186F. Arcane turrets that shot bolts of soul-freezing ice from the Lich King's armory. And then I saw the perfect entry. Not too flashy, but brutally effective. Backquote. Terra IT Turret Item Pest Control Automated Sentry Turret, Model T800. Backquote. Backquote. Description. A standard-issue perimeter defense unit from the Galactic Commerce Guild. Features a tri-barrel rotary plasma cannon, advanced motion and thermal tracking, and a friend or foe recognition system. Can be set to incapacitate, or disintegrate. Simple, reliable, and it makes a very satisfying BRRRT sound. Guaranteed to solve any unwanted visitor problems. Backquote. Backquote. Simple NENTs, Jacking Jack, Junkyard Baron of Sector 7G, backquote. Backquote. Asking price, 100 working car batteries, and 1 ton of refined copper wire. Backquote. Easy, child's play. I had a whole warehouse full of scrap I'd been collecting for just this reason. This would turn my lawn into a blender. No more speeches, no more mobs. Just a short, loud BRRRT, and then quiet. Beautiful. I was about to initiate the trade when a new notification, edged in urgent crimson, flashed across the top of my screen. It wasn't an item listing. It was a system-wide alert. Backquote. System alert. Global atmospheric destabilization detected. Stage 2. Catastrophe initiating. Backquote. Backquote. A wave of extreme solar radiation and greenhouse gas feedback loop is inbound. Backquote. Backquote. Projected impact in 71 hours 58 minutes. Backquote. Backquote. Estimated peak ambient temperature, 60 degrees Celsius. Duration unknown. Backquote. I leaned back, a slow grin spreading across my face. 60 degrees Celsius. That's about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The world outside was about to be put in an oven. Any survivors who weren't cooked alive would be dealing with unimaginable heat, dehydration, and the complete collapse of whatever little ecosystems they were clinging to. For me, it just meant I might have to turn the AC down a notch. The game was changing. The difficulty was ramping up for everyone else. For me, it just meant the value of my air-conditioned, fully stocked fortress was about to go through the roof. This was going to be fun. Apocalypse Day 33. The Great Bake-Off. The aftermath of my little welcome party for David and his gang of aspiring communists was beautiful. The 2 turrets I bought from Scrappy Jack arrived via a shimmering portal right in my workshop. 10-foot-tall tripods of gunmetal gray, each with a triple-barreled plasma cannon that looked like it could turn a tank into a fondue pot. I'd spent a glorious afternoon calibrating them. The friend or foe system was a breeze to set up. I just tagged myself and the fortress's service drones as friend. Everything else, from a stray squirrel to a zombie to a door-to-door salesman trying to share the good news, got tagged as hostile. I set the default response to, quote, disintegrate. Mess-free. For 3 weeks, the silence was golden. No mobs, no desperate pleas, no idiots trying to test my fences. News of what happened to David, who'd apparently managed to crawl back to their little survivor hovel on his elbows, had spread like wildfire. The message was clear. My lawn had a zero-tolerance policy for bullshit. Life was good. I was catching up on my gaming backlog and perfecting my steak grilling technique. Then the alert from the Nexus system came true. The scorching arrived right on schedule. It didn't sneak in, it kicked the door down. One morning I woke up, and the air outside the triple-paned UV-filtered windows was visibly shimmering. The temperature gauge on my console, which was linked to an external sensor, read 55 degrees Celsius. By noon, it hit 61 degrees Celsius. The world had become a planetary-scale air fryer. The feed from my external cameras turned into a highlight reel of nature getting absolutely wrecked. Trees browned and crisped in a matter of hours. The nearby creek, once a babbling source of water, evaporated, leaving behind a cracked, muddy scar. The asphalt on the private road leading to my valley began to look soft and sticky, like melting licorice. Any wanderers caught out in the open simply cooked. They'd stumble around for a bit, then their flesh would start to blacken and split before they just sort of seized up and fell over, smoking gently. Efficient, I guess. My internal monologue was doing a happy dance. Every single person who called me paranoid is probably dead or wishing they were. Sucks to be them. Time for a swim. This was where the real show began. This was the content I was here for. I pulled up a multi-panel view on my main monitor, a 4-way split screen. My own personal reality show. Screen 1. A high-angle thermal view of the survivors' camp, the one David had crawled back to. About 15 heat signatures were huddled in the shade of an overhanging rock, not moving. They were conserving energy, sure, but they were also slowly baking. Screen 2. A zoom-in on one of the families. The mother was using a grimy rag to wipe the forehead of her child. Her lips were cracked and peeling, her eyes sunken. They were rationing what looked like a single half-empty bottle of brown, scummy water. Screen 3. David Henderson himself. The former charismatic leader was now a pathetic lump of misery. He was lying in a makeshift lean-to, flies buzzing around the crude bandages on his vaporized joints. Someone was trying to spoon some water into his mouth, but most of it was spilling down his chin. He looked less like a revolutionary and more like a melted Ken doll. And Screen 4? That was a live feed from my indoor pool area. I walked into the shot, wearing nothing but swim trunks. The air in the massive, beautifully tiled room was a perfect, crisp 25 degrees Celsius. In one hand, I held a tall glass sweating with condensation, filled to the brim with ice and sparkling water that I had just dispensed from the fridge. I took a long, noisy sip, the clinking of the ice cubes probably audible over their parched, shallow breathing if they could hear it. Then, I set the glass down and dove cleanly into the massive swimming pool. The water was a shock of pure, unadulterated bliss. Cool, clear, and perfectly chlorinated. I floated on my back, looking up at the reinforced glass ceiling that showed the angry, hazy orange sky above. I could feel the coolness seep into my skin, a luxury so profound in this new world that it was basically godhood. On the monitors, a man in David's camp collapsed. No one had the energy to help him up. They just watched. Tough break. My preparation wasn't just about survival. It was about this absolute crushing disparity. It was the ultimate "I told you so," without having to say a word. Their suffering was the background music to my vacation. After my swim, I headed down to the wine cellar. The temperature here was an even more perfect 13 degrees Celsius. I ran my hand over the rows of bottles, finally selecting a 2018 Sauvignon Blanc. Chilled, not frozen, perfect for a hot day. But even paradise has room for improvement. My internal monologue, ever the project manager, pointed out a flaw. This is great and all, but the Fortress's main climate control is pulling a stupid amount of power from the mini reactor to fight a 40-degree temperature differential. It's working overtime. Inefficient. The system was designed for normal world extremes, not for living on the surface of Mercury. I sat down in my command chair, popped open the wine, and pulled up the Nexus system. Time to go shopping. I filtered by environment and climate control. A bunch of high-tech Tinte options popped up, but they were all massive industrial units, requiring complex installation. Then, I saw something from a Mofop Joy seller. It had a weirdly lo-fi aesthetic, but specs that were off the charts. Backquote. Item: ever-cooling springstone and atmospheric condensation matrix. Backquote. Backquote. Description: a two-part magical enchantment. The stone, when placed, leaches ambient heat from a designated area, up to 50,000 cubic meters, and shunts it into a pocket dimension. It maintains a constant, user-set temperature between 15 to 25 degrees Celsius with zero energy input. The matrix is a companion enchantment that pulls moisture from the shunted-away hot air, purifies it, and materializes it as pure, cold water at a rate of 1,000 liters per day. Essentially, it's a magic air conditioner that also pisses out Evian. Backquote. Backquote. Alistair the Apathetic, Archmage of the Ivory Spire, currently on sabbatical due to extreme boredom. Backquote. Backquote. Asking price: a comprehensive collection of pre-apocalypse moving pictures of the action and comedy variety. Digital format preferred. Must be high definition. I've already seen all the dramas in my scrying pool and they're a total drag. Backquote. My grin was so wide it almost hurt my face. This was a cosmic joke. This archmage wanted to binge-watch Die Hard and The Hangover. I had a 50-terabyte encrypted server packed with a meticulously curated library of every movie and TV show from the last 30 years. It was one of the first things I secured. Entertainment is a resource too. I initiated the trade. A chat window popped up. Backquote. Alistair, you have them? The John Wick Chronicles? My apprentice spoke of them. A man of great focus, commitment, and sheer will, I hear. Backquote. Backquote. I have all of them. 4K HDR. And the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you're into that. Backquote. Backquote. Alistair. Done. The artifacts are yours. Send the data slate through. And do not spoil anything. I mean it. Backquote. The trade was instantaneous. A smooth, fist-sized riverstone, cool to the touch, and a delicate silver web of what looked like solidified light appeared on my workbench. The 50 terabytes drive vanished. I followed the simple, magically inscribed instructions, placing the stone in my central ventilation hub and weaving the silver web into the grill. The effect was immediate. The low hum of the massive industrial AC units powering down was the first sign. A wave of cool, fresh air, smelling faintly of a mountain spring after a rainstorm, washed through the entire fortress. My power consumption for climate control dropped to 0 on the system monitor. A small copper spigot I'd installed as part of the ritual began to drip, then flow with a steady stream of impossibly pure, ice-cold water into a collection tank. I had not only solved my energy problem, I just created a magical spring inside my house. This was on another level of broken. For the next week, I reveled in it. I established a new routine. Morning swim. Check the Misery channel on the monitors to watch the outside world suck. Spend the afternoon setting up my new automated hydroponics bay with the infinite water supply. Evening spent watching a movie in my perfectly chilled home theater, sipping on a mojito made with fresh mint from my garden and ice from my own magic spring. The world outside was transforming into a death trap. The wanderers that didn't cook became nocturnal apex predators, driven into a frenzy by the cool night air. The few remaining human survivors turned on each other with a ferocity born of terminal dehydration. Fights over muddy puddles and damp caves became commonplace. The price of survival had changed. It wasn't about ammo or food anymore. It was about a single, clean glass of water. And I had a waterfall of it in my basement. Life was becoming almost predictable. Comfortable. It was on the 8th day of the scorching, while I was channel surfing through my dozen external camera feeds, that something broke the routine. A new signal popped up on my long-range communications array. It wasn't the usual garbled static or faint emergency broadcast loop. This was a targeted, tight beam transmission. Weak but clear. It came from the direction of an old National Guard outpost about 50 kilometers south, a place I'd marked on my map as likely looted and abandoned. The signal was a repeating audio loop. A woman's voice. Unlike the panicked shrieking you'd expect, her tone was professional, trained. It was the voice of a soldier or an operator, calm and collected, but with an undeniable edge of exhaustion leaking through. Mayday, mayday, mayday! This is Sergeant Maya Lincoln of the 133rd Engineer Battalion, call sign Bastion 1. We are at the Rocky Flats National Guard Armory. Our primary generator has failed. Water purifiers are offline. Communications array operating on emergency battery. We are requesting immediate assistance. Any friendly forces in the area, please respond. I repeat, this is Sergeant Maya Lincoln, requesting immediate assistance. Supplies critical. Water reserves at 0. We can't hold out much longer. The message looped. Every time, her voice seemed a little thinner, a little more strained. My finger hovered over the console. My first thought wasn't heroism, it was calculation. A National Guard armory. Weapons, ammo, tactical gear, a trained soldier, a potential asset, or a trap. A group of desperate, well-armed people who would kill me for a bottle of water. The risk was high, but the potential reward, a cord, loyal, professional security chief for my growing empire, was even higher. The voice crackled again, requesting immediate assistance. Is anyone out there? I leaned forward, a slow smile creeping onto my face. The game was getting interesting again. Let's see what you've got, Sergeant Lincoln, I murmured to the empty room, and began plotting a course on my tactical map. Apocalypse Day 41. Operation, Recruit a Minion. 50 kilometers. In the old world, that was a 40-minute commute, barely enough time to finish a podcast episode. In this planetary-scale convection oven, it was a journey across the surface of a hostile alien planet. The apathetic Archmage's magic rock was keeping my fortress a crisp 22 degrees Celsius. But the moment I stepped outside, the 62 degrees Celsius heat was a physical blow. It was like opening the door to a blast furnace. Fun. Going out there was, objectively, a stupid idea. But the potential payoff was a Sergeant Maya Lincoln. A trained soldier, an engineer no less, who knew how to handle an armory. Assets like that don't just fall into your lap, you have to go get them. Besides, I was getting bored of my 5-star apocalyptic resort. The Misery Channel was starting to feel like reruns. Time to gear up. My garage wasn't just a place to park cars. It was a workshop that would make Tony Stark jealous. In the center sat the base vehicle for today's field trip. A black, unassuming Ford Expedition Max. A soccer mom's chariot in its previous life. In this life, it was a blank canvas. System, I sub-vocalized, show me mobile heat shielding options. Something that won't melt. A list popped up in my vision. I scrolled past the bulky, energy-intensive Tingte force fields and landed on something more elegant. Back quote. Gehenna-class ablative plating. Back quote. Back quote. Description. A nanite-infused ceramic coating from a world where people vacation on volcanic moons. Disperses thermal energy with 99.8% efficiency. Also happens to be rated to stop small arms fire up to .50 caliber. Side effect. Gives the vehicle a sexy matte black finish. Back quote. Back quote. Forge Lord Kavar, a guy who apparently forges things. Back quote. Asking price. 500 kilograms of refined copper wiring. The Forge Lord is apparently having trouble with his interstellar supply chain. I looked at the mountain of copper wire I'd stripped from a derelict power station last month, which was currently taking up a corner of my dimension-sized storage space. 500 kilograms was chump change. I hit confirm trade. A canister the size of a fire extinguisher materialized on my workbench. I followed the simple instructions, which basically amounted to quote, spray and pray. I pointed it at the expedition and a cloud of black mist enveloped the vehicle. The nanites went to work, flowing over the metal and glass like liquid shadow. In 60 seconds, the glossy black paint turned into a deep, non-reflective matte black. It looked less like a family car and more like something a Black Ops team would drive. Nice. Next, the engine. It would overheat in minutes. I needed a new cooling system. Backquote. Item cryo engine conversion kit. Backquote. Backquote. Description. Replaces standard radiator and coolant systems with a closed-loop cryofluid pump. Keeps engine block at optimal temperature even when operating inside a star. Minor installation required. Backquote. Backquote. Zorp the Star Smuggler. Backquote. Backquote. Asking price. A case of Twinkies. Zorp has read about them in ancient Earth texts and has an insatiable craving. Backquote. I stared at the asking price for a solid 10 seconds. A system that could cool an engine inside a star for a box of yellow sponge cakes in mysterious cream filling. Best system ever. I had pallets of Twinkies. Their absurd shelf life made them a prime pre-apocalypse investment. I completed the trade, and a box of sleek chrome parts appeared. Half an hour of tinkering later, the expedition's guts were replaced with alien tech that hummed with a faint, cold energy. Last touch. Tires. The asphalt out there was a sticky trap. I traded a collection of vintage Zippo lighters to a cyborg from a steampunk dimension for a set of all-terrain thermal-resistant treads, which looked like they could drive up a vertical wall of magma. I swung open the driver's side door. The wave of heat coming off the black plating was intense, but the inside was still the cool, isolated bubble it was a minute ago. I cranked the internal AC, synced my phone to the sound system, and put Vivaldi's Four Seasons on shuffle. The universe, in its infinite sense of humor, immediately started playing Summer. With a low hum, the garage door rolled up, revealing a wall of shimmering, distorted orange air. I put on a pair of polarized sunglasses, took a sip of ice water from my insulated tumbler, and hit the gas. The expedition rolled out of the cool darkness of the garage and into hell. The world outside the reinforced UV-coated windows was a nightmare painting. The sky was a sickly yellow-brown haze. Trees were skeletal, blackened claws reaching for a sky that wanted to incinerate them. The asphalt road had softened into a black river of tar, and my new tires left deep, satisfying grooves in it. I passed the cooked, jerky-like corpses of wanderers who hadn't been smart enough to find shade. They were frozen in their final, stumbling poses, blackened flesh cracked and peeling. It was ugly. But from inside my climate-controlled, music-filled cockpit, it was just scenery. About 30 kilometers in, rounding a bend on the deserted highway, I saw it. A roadblock. A classic of the genre. A rusty pickup truck parked sideways, with a pile of junk and tires blocking the other lane. Standing around it were 4 figures, shimmering like mirages in the oppressive heat. This was the part of the apocalypse I found most tedious. The human element. Always predictable. Always stupid. I slowed the vehicle, not to a stop, but to a crawl. My long-range sensors tagged them. 4 males. Elevated heart rates. Armed with a pathetic collection of hunting rifles and pistols. The system ID'd their weapons. A couple of Remington 700s, a Glock, and what looked like a .22 pistol. A .22. Seriously? He was trying to stop a 3-ton armored vehicle with something people use to shoot squirrels. The sheer audacity was almost respectable. One of them, a skinny guy with a peeling, sunburnt face that made him look like a molting lizard, stepped forward. He held up a hand, trying to look imposing. It was a laughable effort. He was just a dehydrated idiot in dirty clothes. Get out of the car, now! His voice crackled over my external speakers, which I had on just for the entertainment value. Leave the vehicle and all your water, and we'll let you walk away. My inner monologue just sighed. Walk away where? Into the 60-degree meat grinder? What a generous offer. The brain cells on these people must be evaporating. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at him. I just took another sip of ice water. The condensation on my tumbler felt like the ultimate insult. The lizard man got impatient. He shouted again, something I couldn't be bothered to translate from its original moron. Then he made a fatal mistake. He gestured to his buddy with the squirrel shooter. The guy raised his pistol and fired. A tiny tink sound, barely audible over Vivaldi, was the only indication he'd done anything. A tiny scratch appeared on the nanite coating of my windshield, then filled itself in a millisecond, the nanites flowing back into place. Flawless. Okay, playtime's over, I muttered, setting my tumbler back in its holder. This whole interaction felt like an unskippable ad in a mobile game. Annoying and pointless. I didn't reach for the plasma cannons I had stored in the back. That would be a waste of energy. I just moved my foot from the brake to the accelerator. Gently. The expedition's cryo engine didn't roar. It just hummed with a deeper pitch as the torque kicked in. The vehicle surged forward, accelerating from a crawl to 60 kilometers per hour in about 3 seconds. The lizard man's face went from arrogant to confused to terrified in the span of a single heartbeat. He and his friends had maybe a second to realize that I wasn't stopping. They tried to scramble. It was far too late. There was no cinematic crash, no explosion, just a series of dull, heavy thuds that I felt more through the chassis than heard. The makeshift barricade of tires and scrap metal was obliterated, tossed aside like children's toys. The rusty pickup truck was shoved off the road, crumpling with a groan of tortured metal. The 4 men simply ceased to be a problem. I glanced at the side view camera feed on my dashboard display. A brief, messy red smear on the black tar was the only evidence they had ever existed. I grimaced. That was going to be a pain to wash off the tires. I turned the volume up. Vivaldi's violins soared, a beautifully ironic soundtrack to the utter desolation outside. The rest of the drive was uneventful. Just more heat, more dust, more silence. 20 minutes later, my GPS announced I was approaching the coordinates. The Rocky Flats National Guard Armory. It was a squat, formidable-looking complex of concrete buildings, surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A place built to withstand a riot, but not necessarily the end of the world. The main gate was bent inwards, clearly forced open a long time ago. I parked the expedition a safe distance away, and deployed my own welcome gift, a small, dragonfly-like drone that I traded a handful of AA batteries for. It shot out of a hatch in the roof, its optical camouflage rendering it virtually invisible against the hazy sky. The drone zipped over the fence, its camera feeding directly to my main console. The courtyard was a graveyard of military vehicles and desiccated corpses, both human and wanderer. But something else was moving. Audio sensors on the drone picked up the sound of gunfire, sharp, controlled bursts from an M4 rifle. And another sound. A chittering, reptilian-like screeching. The drone rounded a corner and focused on the source. There she was, Sergeant Maya Lincoln. At least, I assumed it was her. A woman in a torn and filthy Army combat uniform. Her face smudged with grime and sweat. Her dark hair tied back in a messy but practical knot. She was using a concrete barricade as cover, firing methodical, ammo-conserving bursts at a swarm of creatures I'd never seen before. They were about the size of large dogs, with scaly, sand-colored hides, moving with a horrifying, lizard-like speed. They were fast, agile, and there were at least a dozen of them, clawing at the concrete, trying to flank her. Mutated lizards, probably drawn here by the last dregs of whatever water they had. She was good, incredibly good. Every shot was a kill. She moved with the fluid economy of a professional, reloading with practiced speed, never panicking. But she was being overwhelmed. Her movements were getting a little slower, her breathing a little more ragged. She was exhausted, dehydrated, and fighting a losing battle. The magazine she slammed home was her last one. I could see the empty ammo pouches on her vest. The largest of the lizard things leaped onto the barricade, its jaws gaping, ready to snap. She was in the middle of aiming at another one and didn't see it. This was it. The moment of decision. The perfect entrance. I smiled, my fingers dancing over a different console. The one that armed the expedition's real defenses. A panel on the roof slid open, revealing the sleek, triple-barreled plasma turret. Showtime, I said to the empty cabin. The game was interesting again. Apocalypse Day 41. Showtime. My drone feed was better than 4K. I was watching a top-tier player sweat her way through a horde of mobs she was clearly underleveled for. Sergeant Maya Lincoln, live and in person, though she probably wouldn't appreciate the audience. She was good, no cap. Her movements were brutally efficient. Aim, fire, new target, repeat. No wasted motion. Every 3-round burst from her M4 dropped one of those scaly, oversized geckos. Her KTD ratio was impressive, but her ammo count wasn't. I could practically see her mana bar blinking red. The problem wasn't her skill, it was the game's terrible balancing. A dozen of those skittering nightmares versus one exhausted human with a finite ammo supply. The math wasn't on her side. They were flanking, moving with a creepy, coordinated intelligence that was new. Most of the mutants I'd seen so far had the IQ of a brick. These things were actually using tactics. Great. Evolving enemies. Just what this hellscape needed. I watched her slam her second-to-last magazine home. Her movements were getting choppy. Dehydration and exhaustion were nerfing her stats in real time. She was backed into a corner, using a concrete jersey barrier as cover. A smart position, but it was fast becoming her tomb. A bigger lizard, the one I mentally dubbed Chonky Boy, was getting ready for a cinematic lunge. It climbed the barrier, saliva dripping from jaws that could probably bite an engine block in half. Maya was busy lining up a shot on a smaller one, peeking around the side. She didn't see the big guy. This was the part where the hero is supposed to swoop in. Me? I was just waiting for the most dramatic moment. It's all about presentation. I let her fire a few more shots. I let her drop the empty mag. I let her reach for the last one on her belt, her hand trembling slightly. I let her feel that cold spike of dread when she realized this was it. 30 rounds left. 12 enemies. The end of her run. Perfect. My fingers, cool and steady, tapped on the console inside my air-conditioned cockpit. Arm plasma turret, I sub-vocalized. Target all hostile life forms. Except for the human one. Don't vaporize the potential new hire. A panel on the expedition's matte black roof slid open with a whisper. There was no fanfare. No A-Team theme music. The triple-barreled weapon that emerged was sleek, alien, and utterly silent. Tiny blue lights flickered to life at the base of each barrel. On my screen, 12 red diamonds appeared, one locked onto each lizard. Chonky Boy was mid-pounce, a blur of claws and teeth aimed right at Maya's exposed back. Fire, I said, my voice as calm as if I were ordering a pizza. 3 silent, blue-white streaks of light, thinner than a pencil, lashed out from the turret. They didn't explode. They didn't make a sound, they just connected. The first bolt hit Chonky Boy mid-air. For a split second, his entire body was illuminated from within by a brilliant cerulean glow, like a cheap Halloween decoration. Then he just came apart, dissolving into a cloud of superheated steam and ash that drifted away on the scorched wind. He was gone before his shadow even had time to disappear. The turret swiveled with impossible speed. Zip, zip, zip. More streaks of blue light. One lizard was bisected so cleanly its top half fell off while its legs kept running for 2 steps. Another one simply vanished, leaving a glassy crater in the concrete behind it. In less than 5 seconds, the entire swarm was wiped from existence. It wasn't a battle. It was pest control. A divine delete button. Silence returned to the courtyard, broken only by the faint hum of my cryo engine. Maya was frozen in place, her last precious magazine clutched in her hand. She stared at the spot where Chonky Boy had been, then at the other smoking ashen patches. Her face was a perfect mask of confusion, shock, and disbelief. She didn't know whether to celebrate or start praying. Time for my entrance. The driver's side door opened with a hiss, breaking the vacuum seal. Stepping out of the expedition was like walking out of a climate-controlled vault into a blast furnace. The 62-degree air hit me, a solid, suffocating wall. But it didn't matter. The nanosuit I wore under my clean, practical cargo pants and black shirt regulated my body temperature perfectly. I wasn't even sweating. I, on the other hand, looked like I'd just stepped out of a business meeting. Clean clothes, clean boots, not a speck of grime. In this world, that was a bigger display of power than any gun. Maya's head snapped towards me. Her training took over instantly. The shock on her face was replaced by a hardened, professional mask. In one fluid motion, she slammed the magazine into her rifle, chambered around, and aimed the weapon squarely at my chest. Don't move! Who are you? Her voice was rough, cracked from thirst and shouting. My inner monologue was having a field day. Standard procedure, I guess. Can't fault the professionalism. But it's like a kitten hissing at a tactical nuke. Adorable, really. I didn't raise my hands. I didn't reach for the sleek laser pistol at my hip. That would be so predictable. Instead, I reached back into the expedition and pulled out my secret weapon. A 500 milliliters bottle of Fiji water, chilled to a perfect 4 degrees Celsius. I held it up. The bottle was sweating, covered in a sheath of condensation that looked like a million tiny diamonds in the hellish sunlight. Each droplet was a jewel of impossible cold, a miracle in this baked open world. Maya's eyes, sharp and focused a second ago, locked onto the bottle. Her rifle didn't waver, but I saw her swallow, a painful movement against a dry throat. Her cracked lips parted slightly. The gun was a tool for survival. The water was survival itself. I gave the bottle a little toss, a gentle underhand arc. It landed in the dust about 5 feet in front of her. The sound of the plastic hitting the dirt was the only thing in the world. Her eyes darted from the bottle to me, then back to the bottle. Her military discipline was at war with every screaming dehydrated cell in her body. For her, who had probably been drinking lukewarm, contaminated water for weeks, that bottle wasn't just water. It was heaven. It was a symbol of a world she thought was gone forever. It was an argument more powerful than any weapon. The war lasted for about 3 seconds. Primal need 1. It always does. Her rifle lowered an inch, then another. Then she let it hang from its sling. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, her eyes never leaving the prize. She knelt, her hand trembling as she reached for it. She picked it up, her fingers wrapping around the cold, wet plastic like she was holding the Holy Grail. With a twist, she cracked the seal. The sound was deafening in the silence. She didn't sip. She tilted her head back and guzzled, pouring the life-giving liquid down her throat. Water ran down her chin, washing away streaks of grime, dripping onto her filthy uniform. It was the most desperate, most beautiful thing I'd seen since the world ended. She finished half the bottle before she stopped, gasping for air, her whole body shaking with relief. She looked at me, and for the first time, the Ishim vigilance in her eyes was replaced by something else. Awe. And a deep, profound confusion. How? She rasped, her voice already sounding less like gravel. I have my sources, I said, leaning casually against the side of my ridiculously overtech SUV. I gestured vaguely at the vaporized remains of the lizards. As you can see, I also have solutions to most pest problems. She stared at the expedition. The matte black, seamless finish. The eerily silent engine. The fact that I was standing here in this heat without breaking a sweat. The gears in her head were turning, connecting dots that didn't make any sense in the world she knew. A soldier like her, a decorated veteran, fighting for her life with scavenged gear. And me, some random guy, showing up in a luxury apocalypse mobile, with magic weapons and refrigerated water. The contrast was a sledgehammer to her reality. I'm building a team, I said, getting straight to the point. No need for fluff. I have a place. A fortress. Air conditioning, running water, unlimited food, and security systems that make this armory look like a garden shed. What I don't have is a professional head of security who knows how to train a militia and spot tactical weaknesses the way a civilian like me can't. I let the offer hang in the air. I wasn't asking. I was stating a fact and providing an opportunity. She looked from me to her rifle, a tool that had barely kept her alive. Then she looked at the half-empty bottle of water in her hand, a symbol of a life she couldn't even dare to dream of. She was smart. She knew a good deal when she saw one. There was no other choice. Out here was a slow, miserable death. With me was something else, something impossible. You provide all that, she stated, her voice stronger now, testing the reality of my words. What do you want in return? Loyalty, I said simply. Absolute and unwavering. My base, my rules. You work for me. You are one of mine. And I take care of my own. She looked me dead in the eye, searching for any hint of deception. She wouldn't find any. My offer was 100% sincere. Her skills for my resources. It was the fairest trade she'd ever get in this ruined world. She gave a single, sharp nod. She screwed the cap back on her water bottle, protecting the last precious drops. She slung her rifle over her back with a sense of finality, as if hanging up an old, obsolete tool. Okay, she said. Deal. Good, I smiled. Welcome to the team, Sergeant Lincoln. Your official title is Chief Security Officer. We can discuss your benefits package on the way. The dental plan is surprisingly good. I opened the passenger door for her. The wave of cool, conditioned air that washed over her made her visibly flinch, then sigh in pure ecstasy. She slid into the plush leather seat, looking around the clean, high-tech interior like she'd just been abducted by aliens. Which, in a way, she had. Name's Alex Ryder, I said, getting back into the driver's seat and setting a new course for the fortress. Maya, she replied, her voice quiet. She ran a hand over the dashboard, her expression unreadable. I put the expedition in gear. Buckle up, Maya. The commute home is a lot more pleasant. As the fortress in the valley came into view on the GPS, I made a mental note. Operation, Recruit a Minion successful. Now I have an actual professional to manage the trigger-happy parts of my perfect little apocalypse. One less thing for me to worry about. This was a solid upgrade. A very solid upgrade indeed. Apocalypse Day 42. Onboarding the new hire. The main gate of Heaven's Bastion slid open with a hydraulic hiss that was smoother than a fresh jar of Skippy. The expedition rolled through, and the 10-inch thick alloy door slid shut behind us, locking with a series of deep, satisfying thunks. For the first time, Maya saw what she'd signed up for. Her jaw didn't drop. She was too well trained for that. But her eyes, man. Her eyes went wide, scanning everything like she was a flat-screen TV trying to render a full CG blockbuster for the first time. The driveway alone was bigger than the entire survivor camp she'd probably crawled out of. Clean reinforced concrete. LED guide lights sunk into the ground, and zero, I repeat, zero, weeds, garbage, or random corpses. I parked the Expedition in its designated slot inside the massive underground garage, right next to a literal mountain of steel plates, I-beams, and enough concertina wire to encircle a small city. My pre-apocalypse shopping spree had been legendary. All right, orientation starts now, I said, killing the engine. Step 1. Don't touch anything shiny unless I say so. Some of it bites. She just nodded, her gaze fixed on a pallet stacked high with military-grade MREs that I used as doorstops. The air in the garage was a cool, crisp 20 degrees Celsius, a miracle compared to the 62 degrees Celsius blast furnace outside. She was still wearing her filthy, sweat-soaked uniform, and she looked as out of place as a mud wrestler at a royal wedding. We took the elevator up. Not some creaky, hand-cranked cage, but a silent stainless steel Otis that played soft jazz. Her knuckles were white, where she gripped her rifle sling. She was processing, trying to make sense of a reality that had just been shattered, glued back together with alien tech, and then shattered again with basic luxury. The doors opened directly into the main living area, and that's when her composure finally cracked. It wasn't one single thing, it was everything. The polished hardwood floors. The massive panoramic window, made of transparent aluminum, of course, overlooking the valley. The lights, on, in the middle of the day. The gentle hum of the central air conditioning. The fully stocked, open-plan kitchen with its granite countertops and gleaming chrome appliances. It wasn't a shelter. It wasn't a bunker. It was a goddamn luxury penthouse from a magazine. A magazine from a world that had ceased to exist 42 days ago. She took a shaky breath. The first real lungful of filtered, non-scorched air she'd probably had in weeks. What is this place? This is home, I said, walking over to the fridge. It was one of those smart fridges with the giant tablet on the front. I tapped the screen, and it whirred, dropping ice into a glass. Rule number 1. I'm the boss. Not the leader, not the president, the boss. My word is law. This isn't a democracy. Voting is for suckers who like to argue about starving to death. I filled the glass with purified water and handed it to her. She took it with a hand that was almost reverent. Rule number 2. Everything here is mine. The food, the shelter, the weapons, the air you're breathing. It's all provided by me. In exchange, I expect one thing. She looked me dead in the eye, her military discipline kicking back in. Loyalty. I snapped my fingers. Bingo. Absolute, unwavering loyalty. You work for me, you eat steak. You protect my home, you get a hot shower every day. You try to screw me over, you get to see how effective the garbage disposal is on human bone. I smiled, but it was the kind of smile that makes people check their holsters. Any questions? I expected hesitation. I expected negotiation. A what if, or a but. A normal person, even a soldier, would be wary. This was basically indentured servitude with better perks. But Maya wasn't a normal person in a normal situation. She'd been out there, she'd seen the democracies where the strongest guy took all the food and the communes, where people knifed each other over a can of beans. She'd stared death in the face a dozen times a day. Her shoulders, which had been tense enough to cut diamonds, relaxed. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over her face. No questions, clear and simple. I prefer it that way. My inner monologue did a little dance. Jackpot. This one gets it. Order and a clear chain of command are like catnip to a soldier. She's not seeing a tyrant, she's seeing stability. Good, I said, my tone lightening. In that case, welcome to the team. Your first order of business is to take the longest, hottest shower of your life. There are clean clothes in the master suite closet, second door on the left. Pick whatever you want. After that, we eat. I'm thinking ribeye steak, medium rare, with a side of garlic mashed potatoes. Sound good? She looked like I had just offered to personally carry her to the gates of heaven. The idea of a hot shower and a real meal was so alien, so impossible, that she could only manage a choked yes, sir. Drop the sir, I said. Call me Alex. Sir is for people who have to demand respect. Now go. You smell like you wrestled a family of angry badgers. She actually cracked a small smile at that, a tiny fissure in her hardened exterior. She set her rifle down gently against a wall, as if retiring an old friend, and walked towards the bathroom like a pilgrim approaching a shrine. While she was rediscovering civilization, I fired up the grill on the patio. A real gas grill, naturally. The sizzle of 2 thick-cut ribeyes hitting the grates was the most satisfying sound in the world. I had a beer in my hand, music playing from outdoor speakers, and a fortress at my back. Life was good. Compared to everyone else on the planet, life was ridiculously, unfairly good. And that was just the way I liked it. An hour later, a new woman walked into the kitchen. The grime was gone, washed away to reveal a face that was sharp and intelligent, with a few faint scars that only added to her character. Her hair was damp and combed back. She'd chosen a simple black t-shirt and cargo pants. Practical, sensible. She looked less like a battle-hardened survivor and more like an off-duty cop. She was staring at the 2 plates I'd set on the kitchen island. Each had a perfectly cooked steak, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and steamed asparagus. She sat down and ate like it was her job. Methodical, efficient, but with an undercurrent of desperate hunger that she couldn't quite hide. She didn't speak until the plate was clean. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was different, clearer, stronger. "You earned it," I replied, leaning back in my stool. "Now for your real job. I built this place for comfort and defense, but I'm a civilian, an investor. My tactics involve spreadsheets and market analysis. Your tactics involve kill zones and fields of fire. I want you to do a full security audit. Walk the entire perimeter. Check the cameras, the fences, the automated defenses. Find the weaknesses. Tell me where I screwed up." Her eyes lit up. This was a language she understood. Purpose. A mission. "I'll start immediately," she said, standing up. "Take a weapon. And this." I tossed her a tablet linked to the base's security network. It showed every camera feed, sensor status, and power grid layout. "I want a full report by 0800 tomorrow." She took the tablet, her fingers flying across the screen with practiced ease. "The plasma turret on your vehicle. Is that a one-off, or can you get more?" "I can get anything," I said with a shrug. "The question is, what do we need?" "We need automated area denial," she said without hesitation. "The outer fence is strong, but it's a passive defense. It slows them down. It doesn't kill them. We have blind spots at the base of the cliffs on the north and west approaches. A small, determined team could use climbing gear to bypass the main choke point. We need overlapping fields of fire, automated turrets placed at key locations controlled from the main hub. That would make this place a true meat grinder." Music to my ears. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a planner. She saw the bigger picture. My inner monologue high-fived itself. Hiring her was the best XP boost I could have gotten. "Okay," I said, pulling up my own system interface, a screen only I could see. "Automated turrets it is." I scrolled through my list of interdimensional contacts. There he was. Xylar, a weapons merchant from a corporate-run, war-torn galaxy where, quote, planned obsolescence applied to entire star systems. His profile picture was a grinning, 4-armed alien in a cheap suit. Me? "Yo, Xylar. Got a minute?" "Xylar, Ryder, my man! Looking for another divine pest control device? Business must be good." "Me? You could say that." "Listen, I need something more permanent. Automated sentry turrets. AI-controlled, all-weather, linked to a central command. Got any blueprints? Something user-friendly for a guy whose last DIY project was putting together a desk from IKEA." Xylar. "Ha, user-friendly. You wound me. I deal in weapons of elegant destruction, not playsets. But, for my favorite primitive, I might have just the thing. The Sting 9 sentry system. A classic. Reliable. It can be loaded with standard kinetic rounds, but the real fun is hooking it up to a power source and letting it fire plasma bolts. The AI is a bit chatty, but its target acquisition is flawless." Me. "What's the price?" "Xylar, the usual schematics and materials package? For you, let's see. The primitive electronics in your world are becoming quite the novelty item for retrotech collectors in the Cygnus sector. How about 5 tons of mixed pre-cascade electronics? Laptops, cell phones, game consoles, anything with a circuit board." I glanced to the corner of the garage, where a mountain of e-waste I'd scrounged from a defunct Best Buy sat waiting. It was literally worthless junk. Me. "Deal. Send it over." Xylar. "Pleasure doing business with you. The materials and a fabricator drone will be deposited in your storage space. Have fun. Try not to vaporize yourself during assembly." A notification pinged in my mind. 1X Sting 9 Sentry System Fabrication Kit, 6 units, and 1X Assembly Drone have been added to your inventory. Total cost, 5 tons of garbage. Total gain, a network of AI-powered plasma turrets. Stonks. I spent the next few hours in the garage, watching the little floating assembly drone zip around, humming happily as it put together the turrets with impossible speed and precision. They were sleek, tri-barreled little death machines, just like Maya had described. A true meat grinder. Meanwhile, the heat wave outside raged on. I put on the news feed from a shaky satellite connection. It showed chaos. A makeshift settlement in what used to be Denver had fallen into civil war over a tanker of clean water. Bands of raiders, their skin blistered and burned, were fighting ravenous mutant creatures for scraps of shade under highway overpasses. They were all living in a hell of my design, a stage 2 feat event I'd been expecting. For them, it was the end of the world. For me, it was just background noise. Just as the drone was putting the finishing touches on the 6th turret, my tablet buzzed. It was a priority alert from Maya. I tapped to open it. It was a live feed from a high-powered telescopic camera she'd set up on the bastion's roof. The camera was aimed at the mouth of the valley, miles away. Coming down the crumbling highway was not a band of starving refugees or a pack of mutants. It was a convoy. A goddamn convoy. At least 10 vehicles, pickup trucks crudely welded with scrap metal armor, a school bus with gun ports cut into its sides, and leading the pack, a massive semi-truck with a snowplow welded to its front, like something out of a Mad Max movie. They were organized, they were armed, and they were heading straight for us. Maya's voice came over the comms, crisp and professional. Alex, we have incoming. Multiple vehicles, looks like a well-equipped raider clan. They're moving with purpose. They know we're here. I looked at the screen, then at the 6 beautiful, freshly assembled plasma turrets sitting on the garage floor, just waiting for installation. A slow, wide grin spread across my face. Don't worry, Maya, I said into the comms, my voice dripping with anticipation. They're not a threat. They're a delivery. Apocalypse Day 42. Afternoon. Customer service is now open. The convoy rumbled to a halt about half a mile from my front gate, kicking up a plume of dust that probably hadn't settled since the Cretaceous period. I watched them on the main monitor in the command center, a room that used to be a home theater but was now my personal NORAD. I had a crystal clear 4K feed from a drone hovering silently at 10,000 feet, courtesy of some very advanced Tintijoy stealth tech I'd traded for a crate of Twinkies. They had no idea they were the stars of their own reality show. Maya stood beside me, arms crossed. She performed a full tactical glow-up, clean black tactical gear, hair tied in a severe bun, and an expression that could curdle milk. She was watching the screen with the intensity of a hawk spotting a field mouse. The vultures, she said, her voice flat. I've heard of them. Led by a psycho named Roz, they roll over smaller survivor camps, take everything, and conscript anyone who can still hold a gun. The ones who can't, they don't get conscripted. So basically the worst kind of corporate takeover, I mused, taking a sip of my iced coffee. The ice cubes clinked, a sound probably more valuable than gold out there. On screen, the convoy looked like a child's junkyard project. The lead vehicle was a semi-truck, with a rusty snowplow that screamed, I have a small PP. The school bus behind it had, vulture quote, spray-painted on the side with a skull that looked more like a constipated potato. A dozen other pickups, bristling with mismatched sheet metal and guys holding Alaska 47s like they were magical protection wards, made up the rest of the posse. About 50 dudes in total. 51, if you count the potato skull. My inner monologue was already drafting the 1-star review. Arrived in shoddy packaging. Aggressive and unprofessional staff. Would not recommend. They're sending out a welcome wagon, Maya noted, as 3 a-holes detached from the main group and started walking up the road towards us. They were swaggering, trying to look tough, but the 62-degree heat was clearly not their friend. They looked less like terrifying raiders, and more like a jerky commercial in the making. All right, let's hear what these NPCs have to say, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. Patch their comms, hail through to the front gate speaker. You're on deck, Maya, I'm busy. Busy with what? She asked, one eyebrow raised. I gestured to the workstation next to the main monitor. I'm playing tower defense. The pre-game setup is the most important part. On my screen I had the schematics for the Sting 9 sentry turrets. The assembly drone had finished its job. Now it was just a drag-and-drop interface. I picked up a virtual turret icon and placed it on a digital map of the fortress perimeter. The map highlighted overlapping fields of fire in a cool, menacing red. It was deeply, deeply satisfying. A crackle came through the speakers. A voice, rough and trying way too hard, boomed from the front gate. Hello, the house. This is your lucky day. The vultures are here. My name is Crank, and I'm here on behalf of Lord Ray's to offer you a deal. Maya stepped up to the console, her face a mask of professional boredom. She pressed the talk button. Her voice, crisp and clear through the high-fidelity outdoor speakers, was a stark contrast to the guy's gravelly shouting. This is Bastion Command. State your purpose. The guy named Crank was visibly taken aback by the clear audio. He was probably used to yelling at people through a rusty gate. Bastion Command. Right. Okay. See, we're your new neighbors. And as a welcoming gift, Lord Raze is offering you his protection. This whole valley is vulture territory now. We are not in need of protection, Maya stated. Another voice, whinier, cut in. Look, lady, maybe you don't get it. There are bad people out there. Monsters. We keep you safe. All we ask in return is a small tribute. A gesture of friendship. Maya didn't even blink. Define small tribute. Crank puffed out his chest. 80%. 80% of all your food, water, fuel, and ammo. You keep 20 to live on. A fair price for vulture protection, yeah? You become one of us. You get to fly our flag. He gestured back at the potato skull bus like it was the goddamn White House. I almost choked on my coffee. 80%? The sheer unadulterated audacity was almost impressive. These guys weren't just scraping the bottom of the barrel. They were trying to lick the splinters. My brain did a quick calculation. 80% of my MREs, my Wagyu beef, my 30-year-old single malt scotch, my arsenal of sci-fi weaponry, and my literally infinite supply of purified water, for what? The protection of a bunch of dehydrated cosplayers with rusty Kalashnikovs? Hey, it wasn't a bad deal. It was a comedy routine. While their pathetic offer hung in the blistering air, I was busy. I dragged another turret icon onto the map, positioning it at the base of the western cliff face, exactly where Maya had pointed out a blind spot. A notification popped up on my screen. Stinger 01, installation drone dispatched. ETA, 4 minutes. A small, spider-like robot detached from the ceiling of the garage below and scurried out through a hidden hatch, carrying the sleek, tri-barreled death machine towards its new home. Maya waited a full 10 seconds before replying, letting them sweat. The silence itself was a power move. Your offer is rejected, she said, her tone as final as a tombstone. Crank's face went from smug to sour. Rejected? What do you mean, rejected? This ain't a negotiation. This is how it is. You either join us or we burn you out. The third guy, who hadn't spoken yet, brandished his rifle. It was an old SKS with wood furniture that looked like it had been chewed on by beavers. We got 50 men. We'll tear this wall down with our bare hands if we have to. We'll smash our way in there and take everything. Your boss in there better get smart, fast. I looked at Maya. She looked at me. A little smirk finally played on her lips. She understood the assignment perfectly. She leaned into the mic. Go ahead, try. Then she cut the connection. The three envoys stood there in stunned silence. They were clearly not equipped to handle that level of polite, absolute dismissal. They expected begging, or fearful negotiating, or at least some angry shouting back. They got the verbal equivalent of a gray-rocking narcissist. They sputtered for a moment, yelled a few more empty threats at the unmoving gate, and then turned and trudged back to their clown car convoy, their tough guy swagger completely deflated. It was beautiful. Report from the field, Alex, Maya said, turning back to me. Threat assessment, low. Morale, pathetic. Equipment, laughable. They're banking entirely on numbers and intimidation. And they have neither, I said, dragging the last of the 6 turrets into its final position on the virtual map. The map of my fortress was now a beautiful, overlapping web of death zones. Perimeter defense system online. All Sting 9 units active and linked to Central Command. AI personality, sassy sentinel selected. Perfect. I pulled up the drone feed again. The 3 stooges were reporting back to their leader, Reyes. He was a big dude, bald, with a face full of cheap, nasty-looking piercings. Even from 10,000 feet, you could see the rage radiating off him. He kicked the tire of his truck. He yelled at his men. He threw a tantrum like a toddler who'd been denied a cookie in the checkout aisle. My inner monologue chimed in again. Customer is expressing dissatisfaction with the service. Standard procedure is to offer them a full and final settlement. Maya was watching him too. He's been humiliated. His whole power structure is based on the fear he projects. He can't let this go. He'll attack. I'm counting on it, I said, pulling up the control interface for the turrets. Each one had its own camera feed. I could switch between kinetic rounds and plasma bolts with a click. What do you think? Non-lethal warning shot first? Or do we just skip straight to the fireworks? They threatened to burn us out and enslave us, Maya said, her voice devoid of any warmth. The time for warnings is over. The only message they understand is overwhelming force. God, I made a good hire. She got it. No half measures, no room for error. You don't wound a rabid dog. You put it down. All right then, I said, leaning back and putting my feet up on the console. Let's let them cook. They'll wait for nightfall. They think darkness is their ally. On the drone feed, Reyes was screaming orders. His men were fanning out, taking cover behind rocks in the meager scrub brush at the mouth of the valley. They were setting up for a siege. They were preparing for a war against a concrete wall and a single formidable gate. They had no idea they were lining up for a turkey shoot. They were bringing rusty knives to a laser light show massacre. The sun began to dip below the scorched horizon, painting the sky in shades of angry orange and purple. The temperature outside was still a brutal 50 degrees, but inside the bastion, the AC hummed along at a perfect 20. I sent a command to the kitchen replicator. "Feel like pizza tonight, Maya?" I asked. "Pepperoni and mushroom?" She was staring at the tactical display, her eyes tracing the positions of the vultures. A slow, hungry grin spread across her face. It was the same look I'd had when I saw the steaks. The look of a professional who was about to get to do her job. "Yeah," she said, her eyes gleaming in the low light of the command center. "Pizza sounds good." Outside, in the growing dark, a gang of 50 fools, convinced of their own strength, were preparing to charge into a fully automated meat grinder. They thought they were the predators. They thought they were the masters of this new, broken world. They weren't a threat. They weren't an invading army. They were a live fire systems test. And the customer satisfaction survey was going to be absolutely brutal. Apocalypse Day 42. Nightfall. The delivery service has some explosive news. Outside, the temperature had dropped to a brisk 48 degrees Celsius. Basically, a cool evening. Inside, my command center was a steady 20 degrees, and the last slice of pepperoni pizza was calling my name. Maya had already finished hers. She was leaning forward, her eyes glued to the half-dozen different camera feeds on the main screen. Her posture exuding a kind of professional hunger. It was the look of a pro gamer waiting for the match to start. "They're getting antsy," she commented, gesturing to the thermal feed. A cluster of 50-ish heat signatures were fidgeting behind rocks in their sad-looking vehicles. Raz is losing his patience. His entire brand is built on shock and awe, not sitting around in the dark. His brand is built on a potato skull logo and a rusty snowplow, I corrected, taking a long drink of a perfectly chilled Coke. The fizz was a symphony of civilization. He's a walking cliché. He'll attack head-on. It's the only play in his book. As if on cue, a clumsy thump echoed from the valley mouth, followed by a high, whistling arc. My inner monologue immediately started narrating. Enemy has launched a projectile. It's a potato, a flaming potato of incompetence. On the screen, a projectile landed a good 50 yards short of the wall, exploding with a wet, uninspired thump-whoosh. It was a homemade mortar round, probably made from a plumbing pipe and a prayer. "Did they just try to shell us with a Molotov cocktail mortar?" Maya asked, a note of genuine disbelief in her voice. "Points for creativity, F for execution," I said, not even bothering to put down my soda. Then the real show started. The vultures all decided to open fire at once. The sound was less a terrifying barrage and more a desynchronized mess of pops and bangs. Bullets from their ancient AKs and SKSs sparked uselessly against the self-healing alloy plates of the outer wall. A heavy machine gun mounted on a pickup started hammering away, the tracers sketching pretty ineffective lines against the concrete. They were literally just making noise. From his command position behind the potato bus, Roz was screaming. The audio sensors picked it up clearly. "LIGH, tem up, boys! Smoke 'em out! Show 'em the power of the vultures!" It was so profoundly, spectacularly stupid that it was almost art. They were wasting their precious, finite ammo shooting at a wall they couldn't possibly breach. It was the tactical equivalent of trying to punch a mountain to death. Maya looked at me. "They're in optimal range." "I know," I said, wiping my hands with a napkin. I leaned forward and tapped a single glowing red icon on my main console. It was labeled Customer Service. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the symphony began. With a series of near-silent hydraulic hisses, 6 panels on the fortress walls and the surrounding cliffs slid open. From within, sleek, tri-barreled turrets extended on articulated arms. They looked alien, predatory, and brutally efficient. The sound they made wasn't a clunky mechanical grind, but a low, terrifying hum of spinning barrels and charging capacitors, like a nest of gigantic, futuristic hornets waking up. A calm, synthesized female voice, the sassy Sentinel AI personality I'd picked, filled the command center. It was set to private just for us. Perimeter defense system online. Acquiring targets. Target-rich environment detected. LOL. Commencing aggressive negotiations. In the valley, the vultures stopped firing, confused by the new shapes on the wall. They pointed. A few of them laughed, probably thinking it was some kind of scare tactic. Roz, the big-brain general, yelled, "What is that junk? Keep firing! Break it! Bad call, my dude." The hum of the turrets escalated into a high-pitched whine for a single, heart-stopping second. Then, all 6 opened fire. It wasn't a chaotic spray of bullets. It was a masterpiece of targeted destruction. The first volley was kinetic. Streams of hypervelocity tungsten rounds, glowing white-hot on the thermal feed, stitched across the vulture's front line. There were no warning shots, There was no suppressing fire. There was only deletion. Men who were standing one moment were turned into red mist the next. The guy manning the heavy machine gun on the pickup simply vanished. The gun itself shredded into a cloud of shrapnel. Raz's jaw went slack. The shouting stopped. It was replaced by the terrified screams of his goons as they were torn to pieces. Switching to plasma. For that extra toasty feeling. The AI chirped in our ears. The turrets switched modes. The sound changed from a high-speed thumping to a series of deep, resonant thwooms. Bolts of blue-white plasma, bright enough to turn night into day for a split second, lanced out. One hit the potato bus. The vehicle didn't just explode, it vaporized. The metal skin flash-boiled, and the resulting shockwave tossed nearby vultures through the air like discarded toys. Another plasma bolt hit the lead semi-truck, melting its engine block into a glowing slag heap. The vultures broke. Their pathetic attempt at an attack had lasted less than 30 seconds. It was no longer a fight. It was an extermination. Survivors scrambled, tripping over their dead friends, trying to crawl back into the darkness. But the turret's optical sensors were flawless. They tracked every moving heat signature. A running man would be neatly bisected by a burst of kinetic rounds. A group trying to hide behind a rock would be erased by a single well-aimed plasma shot that turned the rock into molten lava. In the command center, it was all disturbingly clean. Alex and Maya watched the main screen, which now looked like a top-down real-time strategy game. Red X's were appearing over enemy icons at a dizzying rate. Turret 3's plasma trajectory is a little high. Noticed that? I said, pointing at the screen. It's splashing a bit too much on impact. I'll have Chloe run a diagnostic tomorrow, Maya replied. Her tone as casual as if we were discussing a leaky faucet. But the kinetic spread on Turret 5 is perfect. Look at that grouping. Absolutely textbook. The AI's voice returned. Threats neutralized, hostiles suppressed. Or, liquefied. Perimeter is secure. Would you like to leave a review of your experience? 5 stars, Sassy, I chuckled. Excellent service. I zoomed the drone camera in on the battlefield. It was a charnel house. Wreckage burned silently. The automated slaughter had been so efficient, so total, that there wasn't even much screaming left. Out of more than 50 men, I counted maybe half a dozen survivors, all huddled behind the burning husk of a pickup truck, shivering in terror. And one of them was Ray's. The big, tough guy leader was now just a pathetic, blubbering mess, covered in dirt and someone else's blood. He had completely lost it. He wasn't a vulture anymore. He was a terrified pigeon. Keep the turrets on them, but hold fire, I ordered. I want them to stew in it. My goal wasn't just to win. It was to break them so completely that the very idea of attacking this place would become a horror story, told by survivors for generations to come. This valley wasn't just defended, it was haunted. From this night on, it would be known by a new name, the Tomb of the Greedy. Maya, I said, turning to her. Prep a capture drone, let's pick up the leftovers. I want to know who gave these idiots the confidence to knock on our door. A small, spider-like drone detached from the ceiling and zipped out a side hatch. It was equipped with a taser net and manipulator arms. A few minutes later, it returned, dragging 4 barely conscious, zip-tied raiders into our processing bay in the basement. Razi wasn't among them. I let him run off into the darkness. A broken leader spreads fear more effectively than a dead one. I left Maya to supervise their revival and went down to the interrogation room. It was a sterile, white room with a single steel chair bolted to the floor. When the first vulture came to, a scrawny guy with a terrible tattoo of a snake on his neck. He saw me sitting across from him in a comfortable chair, sipping another Coke. He looked around wildly, his eyes filled with pure terror. Where am I? What the hell was that? He stammered. You're in customer service, I said calmly. And that was a failed subscription attempt. Now I have a few questions. You answer them truthfully, you might get a bottle of water. You lie to me, and my sanitation drones will recycle your biomass into fertilizer. We clear? He nodded so fast I thought his head would fall off. Good. Your gang was just a bunch of low-level thugs. Then, suddenly, you get organized. You get a mortar. You get bold. Why? Who's been giving you your brilliant ideas? The guy hesitated, his eyes darting around. I sighed and tapped my console. A small laser emitter on the ceiling aimed a harmless but very, very bright red dot right between his eyes. He cracked instantly. Okay, it's the new guy. The new guy who joined up a few weeks ago. He's the one who told Ray's this place was a soft target, that it was probably some rich coward hiding behind a big wall. He's the one who helped us build the mortar. A cold feeling, colder than any deep freeze the apocalypse could throw at me, began to pool in my stomach. The pizza I'd eaten suddenly felt like a stone. It was a familiar sensation, the ghost of a past life's rage. This new guy, I said, my voice dropping an octave. He's smart, good with words, knows how to push people's buttons, make them greedy and vicious? Yeah, that's him, the prisoner exclaimed, desperate to please. He's a real smooth talker. Real convincing. He said Roz could be the king of this whole region with the supplies from this place. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. The casual, game-playing mood of the evening had evaporated, replaced by something ancient and unforgiving. What's his name? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The universe, it seemed, had a sick sense of humor and a penchant for reruns. The prisoner trembled under my gaze. His name's Mark. Apocalypse Day 43. The past has a nasty habit of not staying dead. The name hit my ears and landed in my gut like a lead weight. For a second, the sterile, white interrogation room felt exactly like the grimy alley where I'd died. Same cold dread, same bitter taste of betrayal welling up in the back of my throat. The ghost of a zombie's bite flared on my old shoulder. The schmuck in the chair, the one with the snake tattoo that looked more like a constipated worm, was watching me, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and a desperate hope that he'd said the right thing. He just had no idea how right he was. This new guy, I repeated, my voice now a low, flat monotone that scared him more than yelling ever could. Tell me what he looks like. He's kinda average height? Brown hair? Always talking, you know? Got this smile that makes you feel like he's your best friend, even when he's asking you to do some real messed up stuff. Real smooth. He convinced Ray's this place, he gestured vaguely at the solid walls around us, was owned by some tech billionaire coward who'd panic and surrender if we just showed up with enough guys. Check, and triple effing check. That was Mark. The silver-tongued serpent, the master of making his own greed and cowardice sound like a brilliant, logical plan for everyone else. Pushing me into a horde of wanderers for a can of beans? He probably framed it as a, quote, strategic sacrifice for the good of the group. That son of a bitch. And the mortar? I pressed. His idea, the prisoner blurted out. He found the schematics online before the net went down. Said it was all about, quote, shock and awe. Said we could blast a hole in the gate and walk right in. He called it the human wave tactic. Said you couldn't possibly stop 50 guys at once. I had to suppress a laugh. A human wave. Against automated plasma turrets. This dude was still playing by caveman rules while I was ordering weapons from the year 3000. It was like watching a toddler trying to fight a tank with a water pistol. The sheer, breathtaking stupidity of it was almost impressive. The clown show wasn't just Ray's gang. It was Mark's core philosophy. He thought he was playing chess when he didn't even know what the pieces were. The prisoner was still talking, trying to fill the silence. He's Ray's number 2 now. Everyone listens to him. He says that after this, we'd rule the whole valley, that we'd have all the food, all the power. I held up a hand and he shut his mouth with a click. The laser dot on his forehead hadn't wavered. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a shark gives right before it bites. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The worm-tattooed idiot started shivering. You, I said, my voice now light, almost cheerful. You have provided me with extremely valuable intel. For real. And I'm a guy who believes in rewarding good work. A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes. What a fool. So I'm going to give you a chance to live, I continued. Maya is going to escort you to the edge of my territory. She's going to give you a bottle of water and a protein bar. A parting gift. He could barely contain his relief. Thank you, I won't ever. I'm not finished, I cut him off. You have a job to do, a delivery. You are going to go back to your camp. You're going to find Mark. You're going to look him right in his eyes, and you're going to give him a message from me. Word for word. You understand? He nodded frantically. Good. Here's the message. The owner of this fortress, Alex Ryder, is waiting for you. The prisoner blinked. The name meant nothing to him, but the look on my face, the absolute, predatory certainty in my voice, that, he understood perfectly. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a mailman delivering a declaration of war. My war. Now get out of my sight, I said, tapping the console to release his restraints. A side door hissed open, and Maya was standing there, her expression unreadable. She grabbed the dazed thug by the arm and hauled him out without a word. Alone in the room, the smile finally dropped from my face, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. Mark. The universe really did have a sick sense of humor. It wasn't enough to give me a second chance. It had to drop my final boss right on my doorstep in the early game. Fine. Let him come. Last time, I was a scared office worker, with a backpack full of ramen. This time, I owned the damn supermarket. Mark thought he was a rising star in this new, brutal world. He was about to find out he was just a bug flying straight into a high-tech, interdimensional bug zapper. His human wave was met with plasma. His brilliant tactics were a footnote in my turret's kill log. He was a relic, a fossil from a dead world, and I was the asteroid. But his arrival changed things. The vultures were just trash mobs. Mark was different. He was smart, manipulative, and now, apparently, he had a small army of morons at his beck and call. Relying solely on my fortress's defenses was a passive strategy. It was time to upgrade the user, not just the interface. Back in my command center, I pulled up the Nexus trading system. The interface shimmered into existence in front of me, a glowing nebula of potential deals. I bypassed the usual channels for tech and weapons from the Ting to Joy, and went straight to the section I'd bookmarked as Mystic Arts and Woo-Woo BS. My search query was simple: personal physical enhancement, novice level, fast acting. A list populated. Dozens of traders from cultivation realms, magic academies, and shamanistic tribes popped up, hawking their wares. Wandering Sword Sage wants 100 kilograms of high-purity titanium for his new flying sword. Offers Breath of the Turtle technique. Increases lung capacity by 300%. Pass. I have air filters for that. Alchemist Zorp from Glimmer 7 wants a complete digital archive of 80s rock music. Offers Potion of Minor Vigor. Lasts 2 hours. Tempting, but I need something permanent. Then I saw it. A deal from a trader named Elder Feng of the Azure Cloud Sect. Elder Feng wants 10 high-quality spirit jades for a defensive array. Note: well-cut earth diamonds and emeralds are an acceptable substitute. Offers 1x marrow cleansing pill, foundation grade. My fortress, built over an old eccentric millionaire's diamond mine, what a legend, had a literal stockpile of uncut gems. Chloe's new mining drones had been pulling them out for weeks. I considered them shiny paperweights. To this Elder Feng, they were vital infrastructure components. One man's trash, another man's treasure. Bet. I initiated the trade. Less than Alex Ryder, greater than. I have 10 flawless, uncut 50-carat emeralds. Will that suffice for your array, Elder Feng? A reply came back almost instantly, the text tinged with an archaic, formal energy. Less than Elder Feng, greater than. Such quality. The heavens favor me. The stones are sufficient. The pill is yours. Use it in a secure location. The process of expelling mortal impurities can be vigorous. Do not blame this old master if you soil your robes. The trade was confirmed. A small, ornate wooden box materialized on my desk with a soft chime. Inside, nestled on a bed of red silk, was a single, milky white pill that seemed to hum with a faint inner light. It smelled faintly of ozone and fresh rain. Soiling my robes was the least of my worries. All I could think about was the look on Mark's face when he realized the coward he was hunting could now punch a hole through a concrete wall. My upgrades were personal, but the world's downgrades were universal. As I was admiring my new toy, an alert pinged on the main strategic display. It was from the atmospheric monitoring system Chloe had jerry-rigged by linking our sensors to a constellation of dying weather satellites. On the global map, massive, sickly green and yellow clouds were coalescing over the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. They were vast, covering thousands of square miles, and they were creeping toward the continents. Evelyn, you need to see this, I called over the comm. Dr. Reed appeared on my screen a moment later, pushing her glasses up her nose. What am I looking at, Alex? The next party favor from the cosmos, I said grimly, pointing at the screen. The system's chemical analysis, based on atmospheric refraction, is flagging extreme concentrations of sulfuric and nitric compounds. The song Niet Thu Dot is over. Get ready for Dot 2. Mula Axit Tuthon. The acid rain of death. The heat wave boiled the oceans, and now the polluted vapor was coming back down with a vengeance. Corrosive precipitation, she murmured, her clinical mind already running through the implications. It'll poison water sources, kill off any remaining surface vegetation, and dissolve unprotected structures. And flesh. Exactly. Our fortress is shielded, but everyone outside. I left the sentence hanging. This was the true nature of the Cascade Apocalypse. It wasn't one event. It was a series of extinction-level filters, one after another. Just when you thought you'd survived one hell, a new, worse hell was already brewing. Dot. Miles away, in a squalid camp set up in the ruins of a highway underpass, Mark was celebrating. He wasn't the leader, not officially, but Rozzy was a tool, and Mark was a hand that wielded him. They'd lost men, sure, but that was an acceptable loss. He had seen the fortress through binoculars. It was a prize of unimaginable worth. He was high on the promise of that prize, the sheer power it represented. His victory speech to the remaining vultures was interrupted when a figure stumbled out of the darkness and collapsed into their camp. It was the worm-tattooed goon I'd sent back. He was pale, shaking, and clutching a water bottle like it was a holy relic. "What happened? Where are the others?" Reyes bellowed, grabbing the man by his shirt. The man ignored him, his terrified eyes scanning the crowd until they locked on Mark. He scrambled over to him, falling at his feet. "A message," the man croaked, his voice raw with fear. He let me go. He sent me with a message. For you." Mark knelt, a confident, patronizing smile on his face. "A message? From the rich coward in the box? What did he say? Is he ready to negotiate?" The prisoner shook his head, trembling. He took a deep breath and delivered the line exactly as I'd told him to. He said, "The owner of this fortress, Alex Ryder, is waiting for you." The world stopped. The crackling fire, the drunken cheers of the other raiders, the distant howl of a Dithu. It all faded into a dull roar in Mark's ears. Alex Ryder. The name was impossible. A ghost. A piece of his past he had personally thrown away to be torn apart. His first reaction was pure, cold dread. A jolt of primal fear that made the hair on his arms stand up. How? But then, as the seconds ticked by, the fear was consumed by something else. Something far more powerful. A feeling that had guided his entire life. Greed. He wasn't dead. Alex, the weak, trusting, pathetic fool, was still alive. And he owned that. That fortress. That power. The turrets that vaporized men and melted trucks. Mark's mind, a machine built for treachery and opportunism, went into overdrive. It didn't make sense. The only possible way for a loser like Alex to survive and build something like that was if he'd stumbled onto some kind of cheat code for the apocalypse. A secret. A treasure. Something that broke all the rules. The fear was gone. In its place was a burning, all-consuming hunger. He wasn't just going to take the fortress anymore. He was going to take Alex's secret too. And this time he'd make sure the ghost stayed dead. Apocalypse Day 44. No time for buyer's remorse. I stared at the milky white pill in the ornate box. Looked like a breath mint for angels. Elder Feng's warning about soiling my robes echoed in my head. Ha! I was wearing tactical cargo pants and a t-shirt. Let's see what this marrow cleansing pill could do to them. I popped it in my mouth and swallowed it with a swig of purified, chilled water from my dispenser. For a moment, nothing happened. I almost felt ripped off. Maybe marrow cleansing was just the name of some cultivator brand laxative. Then the fire started. It wasn't a burn, it was a deconstruction. It felt like every cell in my body had simultaneously decided to go on strike in protest by spontaneously combusting. A million tiny needles, superheated and dipped in acid, stabbed me from the inside out. My skeleton felt like it was trying to divorce my muscles in the messiest way possible. My vision went white, then black, then a kaleidoscope of colors that probably didn't even exist. I bit down hard on a leather strap I'd had the foresight to grab, the taste of cowhide, and my own sweat filling my mouth. The sound that wanted to tear its way out of my throat wasn't a scream. It was the kind of noise a modem makes when you drop it in a blender. I swallowed it. No witnesses. Not even myself. The process felt like it lasted 1,000 years. It was probably 5 minutes. Just as I thought my consciousness was about to nope out of existence for a second time, the pain vanished. All of it. Instantly. It was replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated vitality that surged through me like a shot of divine adrenaline. I stumbled to my feet, my legs feeling like coiled steel springs. I looked down at my hands. A thin layer of greasy, black filth coated my entire body, smelling like a chemical fire at a garbage dump. So that was the mortal impurities. Gross. But underneath it, my skin was clearer. My old office drone slouch was gone, replaced by a posture that felt strong, balanced. I clenched my fist and the air seemed to crackle. I didn't just feel stronger. I felt like I'd been upgraded from a dial-up modem to a fiber-optic gigabit connection. The world around me snapped into 8K HDR. I could hear the faint hum of the server racks 2 floors below me. I could smell the ozone from the air purifier in the next room. I could probably punch a hole through the dude who invented pop-up ads. Mark. The thought of him didn't bring the old phantom pain anymore. It brought a thrill. The Predator's thrill. This was better than any gun. Game on, you backstabbing piece of trash. Just as I was about to head for the world's most satisfying shower, a klaxon blared through the command center. Red lights flashed across the consoles. On the main screen, the global map showed those sickly green and yellow clouds had made landfall. Apocalypse, Part Da Electric Boogaloo was officially starting. I strode to the main panoramic window, a 2-inch thick sheet of transparent armorplast, and watched the sky. The first drops fell. They weren't clear. They were a viscous yellowish green, like alien bile. Where they hit the ground, the rocky soil hissed and smoked. A lone twisted tree on the ridge opposite the fortress was struck by a dozen drops. The leaves instantly blackened and crumbled to ash. The bark bubbled and sloughed off, exposing raw, smoking wood underneath. Then the drizzle became a downpour. A wave of noise hit the fortress, not the gentle pitter-patter of rain, but a furious, sizzling roar, like a million frying pans hitting water. The world outside dissolved into a blur of acidic fury. The distant screams started next. The wanderers in Dathu caught in the open didn't stand a chance. Their shrieks were sharp, horrifying, and blessedly short as their flesh was rendered from their bones. Any metal left exposed. The skeletons of rusted-out cars, old power lines, began to visibly corrode, fizzing and giving off plumes of acrid smoke. It was like God was trying to power wash the planet with pure battery acid. In my fortress? My beautiful, glorious fortress? A faint, shimmering blue dome of energy flickered into existence, enveloping the entire compound. It was the barrier stone I'd traded a bunch of cheap plastic toys for, with some wizard who was bored of his kids. The acid rain hit that invisible field and just slid off. It was utterly silent. No sizzle, no roar, just a cascade of lethal chemicals harmlessly flowing down an unseen surface and pooling on the ground outside, turning the earth into toxic sludge. I leaned against the window, the glass cool against my newly purified skin. I took a sip from a can of ice-cold Coke. The contrast was so ridiculous, it was hilarious. Outside, a biblical chemical apocalypse melting the very bones of the world. Inside, me, stinking like a Superfund site but feeling like a superhero, drinking soda and watching the show. This was the life. ... Miles away, huddled under a crumbling concrete overpass that was actively dissolving above them, Mark and the dregs of the Vulture Gang were living a different reality. The air in their makeshift cave was a cocktail of terror, sweat, and the burning tire stench of the acid rain, eating away at the rebar in the ceiling. Every few seconds, a chunk of concrete would hiss and drop, or a stream of yellow death would find a new crack to drip through, sending the raiders scrambling and cursing. One unlucky idiot got a splash on his arm. He didn't even have time to scream properly before the skin and muscle sloughed off, exposing bone that immediately started to blacken. Mark pressed himself against the damp, grimy wall, trying to make himself as small as possible. The confident, manipulative mastermind was gone, replaced by a shivering rat trapped in a collapsing cage. This wasn't right. This wasn't how the world was supposed to work. He had survived the zombies. He had dominated other survivors. He was supposed to be a king in this new age. But the world just kept throwing new, impossible rules at him. First, a fortress that vaporized men. Now, rain that melted them. And through it all, somewhere in that pristine palace on the hill, was Alex. Weak, pathetic, gullible Alex. He was probably sipping wine right now, warm and dry and safe. The sheer, soul-crushing unfairness of it all consumed Mark. The fear was still there, a cold stone in his gut, but it was being rapidly burned away by a supernova of pure, incandescent envy. Alex had a cheat. A glitch in the matrix. Something that let him bypass the apocalypse that was grinding everyone else into paste. This is his fault, Mark hissed to himself, his knuckles white as he gripped a rusty pipe. All of this, it's his. It was an insane leap of logic, but for a mind like Mark's, it was the only thing that made sense. Alex wasn't just surviving. He was hoarding survival itself. ... Back in my command center, post-shower and dressed in clean clothes, I was running a diagnostic. The barrier stone was holding at 100% efficiency. The golem sentries were unaffected. The nuclear generator was humming along perfectly. But the external cameras showed something I didn't like. The outer layer of the fortress, thick plates of military-grade steel, were showing microscopic pitting and discoloration where the stray, deflected drops had splashed. The barrier was perfect, but nothing is perfect forever. What if a power fluctuation caused the barrier to blink for even a second? Relying on one system, even a magic one, was for suckers. Time for another upgrade. I pulled up the Nexus trading system. Chloe, patch me in. I need to make a run to the Intergalactic Home Depot. On my screen, a list of material traders populated. I filtered by advanced alloys and self-repairing. Less than scraplord _7, outer rim salvage greater than, got a C-grade self-healing hull plate. Nanites are a bit slow, might take a whole minute to patch a plasma hole. What you got? I need heavy metals. Platinum, iridium, osmium. My shipwife needs new jewelry. My lips curled into a smile. The vultures had been kind enough to deliver a dozen armored trucks right to my doorstep. Their smoking, melted-down chassis were now a treasure trove of refined metals, just waiting to be harvested by my drones. Less than Alex Rider, greater than. I have the melted-down husks of 12 terrestrial armored vehicles, rich in steel, tungsten, and trace rare earths. I'll throw in 200 kilograms of pre-apocalypse lead plumbing from my bunker. My drones can have it all smelted into uniform ingots for you. Less than Scraplord_7 greater than. Lead? The good dense stuff? For my kinetic slugs? Deal. Sending you the schematics and 50 metric tons of regenerator alloy panels. Just layer them over your existing hull. The nanites will bond it at a molecular level. Scratch it, shoot it, whatever. It'll fix itself. Pleasure doing business with ya, flush bag. The transaction completed. In a designated corner of my massive storage space, a mountain of sleek gunmetal gray panels materialized with a heavy thud. Chloe was going to have a field day with this. In a week, my fortress wouldn't just be magically shielded. Its physical skin would actively heal itself. Good luck getting through that with a homemade mortar, Mark. The acid rain continued for 3 straight days. It effectively sterilized the valley, wiping out 90% of the wanderers and Dithu. But it also destroyed the infrastructure of the old world. Roads became rivers of sludge. Buildings collapsed. Every single vehicle left outside was now a useless, corroded heap. For the scattered survivors out there, the game difficulty had just been cranked up from hard to nightmare. A solid roof over your head just became the most valuable currency on Earth. And I owned the only bank. On the 4th day, the rain stopped. A weak, watery sun broke through the chemical haze. Inside his stinking cave, Mark stepped out, blinking at the ruined world. Half of his men were dead, either from the rain or the fights that had broken out in the cramped, terrified darkness. But Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose. Brute force was dumb. He'd been thinking like Ray's. But he wasn't Ray's, he was a manipulator. He gathered his remaining handful of loyal thugs. He is not a god, Mark said, his voice low but intense, his old charisma returning. He's a cheat, a man who found a secret, and he is keeping it all to himself while the rest of us melt. He pointed a shaking finger towards the distant, pristine silhouette of my fortress. That place is the only real sanctuary left in this whole damn state, maybe the whole country. Attacking it again by ourselves is suicide, but we're not the only ones who want it. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face, a mirror of the one I had worn just days before. There are other groups out there. The old National Guard remnants at Fort Carson. The psycho-survivalists in the mountains. They're all desperate. I'm going to pay them a visit. I'm not going to offer them a share of the food or weapons. I'm going to offer them something better. He looked each of his men in the eye, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I'm going to offer them the secret to killing the apocalypse. And together, we are going to tear that fortress down, brick by brick, and take it from Alex Rider.